eyebrows when she introduced herself as Ms. Crenshaw. She smiled gently and explained that it was necessary in her line of work with couples and therapy. She wanted to keep it professional and personal matters out of it. Some people can get upset during these sessions, so she didn't want any questions like, "What would your husband think?" It made sense. She joked that calling herself Ms. made her sound like a serious activist, but I figured anyone who got to know her for more than a few minutes would see she was just a kind older lady. She said writing this journal is good for my therapy. I didn't really know that before, but I went along with it. It feels helpful to write down my thoughts as I remember them, rather than how they were talked about in the news, which felt more like gossip than real reporting. People are often viewed as heroes or villains, but they are just like everyone else. That's how modern news seems to work. Lift people up, then bring them down. Let me introduce myself. I am Ben Blackcloud. Technically, my name is Benjamin, but I dislike it, and I dislike Benji even more. My former partner enjoyed calling me those names. Speaking of partners, I had one. You probably haven't heard of me, and that's okay. Unless you're in my field. You've only heard of me if I helped with a show you ran. To a small group, I was known as the Devil Incarnate, always wanting bigger and better things for less money, always needing more space for our acts. But my partner? You'd know him. Jeff Klondike, known to his fans as Clonkers. Picture him jumping around on stage, making silly sounds, or shouting his mother's call of Jeffrey when he was in the middle of a funny story. Being business partners with a famous comedian has its challenges. Often no one knows who I am or believes me when I tell them. He was the star, the one in the spotlight making everyone laugh and enjoying himself. I was the quiet one behind the scenes, making everything work smoothly. You think that when you buy a ticket for a show, he does everything alone? Of course not. No, he arrives 2 hours before the show starts. He knows when to show up, picks from a large selection of jokes, goes on stage, tells his stories, enjoys the applause, and then leaves to get a massage, have a steak, and visit a club. Who do you think books the venue? Who makes the deal with Ticketmaster or similar companies? Who gets tickets for friends or acquaintances of Jeff? Who arranges hotels or airline tickets or rents a bus for the show? Who finds the rehearsal space? Who sets up the seating in arenas, works with the screen teams to install LED panels, and coordinates the sound teams who set up microphones and speakers? Who organizes the lighting and builds the big lighting setups for the show? Jeff doesn't handle any of that. After his set, he hops in a taxi and goes out. I'm the one who manages the breakdown of the stage and equipment, makes sure everyone gets paid, and I'm the last one to turn off the lights. And who writes his material? Here's a secret. It's not him. Though many think he does, just check the credits at the end of one of his specials to see for yourself. The truth is, without me, the show wouldn't happen. Jeff shines on stage, no doubt about that. But without me, there would be no stage, no show, and no material. He knows this too. We are partners officially, but it's not me who goes on talk shows or game shows. I don't have attention drawn to me in the same way. Yet Jeff understands that without my skills in organizing and problem solving, his show wouldn't be what he wants it to be. So, we are partners, both on paper and financially, even if not many people recognize it. It's known as the Jeff Klondike Show, and I'm surprisingly okay with that. I don't feel bitter. I understand who I am and have found ways to accept it. This is not what I imagined when I left my hometown to seek my fortune, but as the tribe says, the journey is never straight. It bends like a river, and when the river overflows, you go with the new path. That's just how it is. A bit of background might help, since I didn't come into this world as a stage manager or manager of comedians. I am part of the Navajo tribe and come from a small town called Tiknos-Pos, located near the Arizona and Utah border. If you look up the place on Google Maps, it can show you the wrong spot. It just shows the main road nearby. The real town is a bit to the south and west of that point. It's a small place, and believe me, when I was younger, I couldn't wait to leave. My mom is from Chicago, so I'm only part Native American, but that's enough to matter where I grew up. I learned a lot about my culture that I wasn't really interested in. I respect my tribe and their traditions, that's important to me, but I didn't want my identity to only be about being Native American. I wanted to be understood as a person who also happens to be Native American, rather than just being defined by it. There are many people I call professional Native Americans back home who focus on that in everything they do, and that's fine for them. I just wanted more than that for myself, so I left as soon as I could. There's no hard feelings. I still visit often to see my family and my brother. We share stories about our lives, enjoy some drinks, and have fun together just like any family. We have a different background, which adds to our stories. I share this so you can understand a bit about me, though it doesn't really change the story. I am 5 feet 10 inches tall, taller than many in my community, and I have nice olive skin, which I like because I don't usually get sunburned. My eyes look similar to yours because I'm only part Native American. The main thing that shows my heritage is my hair. It's long, thick, and black, and when I grow it long, it reaches my shoulders. Sometimes, from behind, people might mistake me for a woman because of my hair, and that's happened more than once. I would say I'm neither ugly nor handsome, just somewhere in the middle. I have a few gray strands now, which is normal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, Mom and Dad are still alive. One thing about being Native American is that we often live a long time. Mom is from Chicago, and she's very much a typical city person. Dad, on the other hand, is one of those professional Native Americans I mentioned. He leads tours, takes part in traditional ceremonies, dresses in cultural clothing, and speaks in a unique style. When he returns from work, he changes into jeans and a sweatshirt, speaking like President Biden. He understands what tourists expect and is happy to provide it for them, earning money from their visits. After everything that the federal government has done to our people, it's only fair. My brother is a carpenter. He works with both traditional framing and custom builds, and he studies old Native American woodworking techniques. Did you know the Navajo had their own methods? They do. It's much like Japanese techniques. It focuses on making strong joints using only the wood itself. He combines both styles in his work. He is married to Joe, and they have 3 kids who bring me joy whenever I come home. I share stories of far-off places and famous people that I learn about through their managers, even if I never get to meet them. As I mentioned, I left home as soon as I could. I pursued drama studies. Yes, I was a drama major at Northwestern University in Chicago, which is not a famous school, but part of their communications program. They offered several scholarships, and as a minority interested in the arts, I had a good chance. My drama teacher knew people there, encouraged them to support me, and with some decent test scores and a personal letter, I was accepted with almost a full scholarship, only needing to pay for room and board. I didn't move to LA or New York because they are very competitive, and many people go there. I chose Chicago because I wanted to focus on comedy. I know LA and New York also have vibrant comedy scenes, but they can be tough to break into. I found inspiration in the history of comedy in Chicago, especially from Second City. It felt good to be away from home and to create a new identity for myself, definitely a good memory. Overall, my college days in Chicago during the early 2000s were really nice. I was known as Cool Ben, not Benji, and I played a mysterious character inspired by Native American themes. I really tried to play that part well. If you've got something good, you should show it off, right? Thank you to Zero Mostel for that truth. Anyway, to make a long story short, I shared a room with a guy named Monty Tremlow. We had a bit of fun with that name, and through him, I met his cousin, Jeff Klondike. At that time, I was learning about theater, both in front of the audience and behind the scenes. I studied dramatic arts, improv, stage management, writing lines, speaking them, acting. I was not great at that, but I was okay with ballroom. And even stage combat. Stage combat is a special skill, and for it to look real, it needs to be practiced a lot. It was so much fun. We put on performances, and I got to show what I could do, but I eventually realized that I just wasn't good enough. That realization was hard. And honestly, I felt like it was all Jeff Klondike's fault. He wasn't part of my usual group. He was his own person. I think he did deliveries during the day, maybe as a bike messenger since he showed up on a bicycle at our events. And at night, he did improv and stand-up comedy. I met him when Monty took me to a show where Jeff was performing. To be honest, he wasn't that great. He had a strong presence and knew how to engage the audience, but his jokes could have been better. He seemed to struggle, often saying and which was not appealing. I had started trying my own hand at comedy writing. I shared my work with friends, including Monty, which is why he invited me to see his cousin that night. And I even performed at some open mic nights. Let me tell you, it's really tough to get the courage to perform at an open mic. There are expectations. You have to be smooth, calm, and confident, and most importantly, you need to be funny. If not, it can feel like a disaster. Even though many people on stage are just starting out, the audience expects every line to be hilarious. It can be very harsh. Many aspiring comedians have struggled that first night and have felt really discouraged afterward. But if you get just one genuine laugh, it can change everything. You might want to keep doing it forever. Making a living as a comic is hard because you have to travel a lot, which can hurt your relationships, but that's another story. Fortunately, I got a few laughs and thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. Ah, the dreams of youth. I think part of my problem was not embracing my Native American background. People expected me to, but I didn't want to be defined by that. I wanted to be recognized for my skills, not just because I was Native American. Because of this, I often avoided the topic, joking a bit about my hair instead. Looking back, I wonder if I would have had more success if I had included my heritage in my work instead of thinking it was something to be ashamed of. But hindsight is always clearer, right? At least I wasn't one of the people who had to face certain challenges that some in my tribe did. One person, for instance, had an unusual situation due to their condition, but they were recognized for their unique abilities despite the struggles they faced. Not everything was negative, though. That night after Jeff's performance, I went to give him feedback. It didn't go well. Monty was sitting there, calm and relaxed, while Jeff had a very annoyed look on his face. At the end of my feedback, he asked, "Let me guess. You think you could do better?" "Well, yes, but I was just trying to help. I thought being in the program gave me the right to offer suggestions. Looking back, I'm surprised he didn't react more aggressively. I've seen him do that before. To be honest, I felt my suggestions were correct. Even now, I believe what I pointed out was valid. However, offering feedback to someone I barely knew showed a lot of nerve on my part. I really shouldn't have assumed he'd appreciate it. He did not take my feedback well at all. He was quite angry, but Monty stepped in to calm things down. "Jeff, I'm sure he didn't mean any offense, right, Ben? He was just trying to help," Monty said, trying to ease the tension. At that moment, I recognized I had crossed a line. "I'm really sorry, man," I said, quickly backpedaling. Jeff glared at me, trying to decide whether to walk away or confront me. "So you have your own material, huh?" he finally asked after a pause. I replied, thinking of a smart response. I wasn't sure where he was going with this. "Do you or don't you?" he asked, shifting his stance, clearly ready to leave. "Well, yes," I replied carefully. "Okay then." He cracked his knuckles and nodded at Monty. "Here's the deal. I'll give you some of my material and you share some of yours. We both perform at different clubs on 2 nights. One night you do your stuff along with mine. The next night I'll do the same. We won't watch each other. The audience and Monty here will judge us. If you're better, I'll stay quiet and listen to you. If I'm better, you'll have to accept that. Are you in?" Oh my gosh! A laugh-off. An old-fashioned laugh-off just like that. I hadn't heard of one like this before, and I was all in, just for the fun of it. It didn't matter so much who won, but it would be nice to show him who was better. I pretended to think it over, even though I was already excited. Of course, I wouldn't share my best material. There was no reason to make it hard for myself, and I was sure he'd do the same. It would be silly not to. But yes, this was a great idea. In the end, I nodded, reached out my hand, and we shook on it. "All right, 2 weeks. I need your material in a week so I can practice. I'll send mine to you through Monty. Sound fair? We'll perform at the Comedy Club and Marcel's in 2 weeks, both with open mic night. May the best person win me, hopefully. Good luck, Tonto." And that was the start of the teasing. He wasn't mean about it, though. If I told him I didn't like a name he used, he would stop calling me that. It didn't bother me much because he always had plenty of others. I think the worst name he ever gave me was Native Michael Bolton after a bad hair attempt. A lesson learned there. Monty nodded, rubbing his hands together with excitement about the contest we had just arranged, saying, "I am going to make so much money from this. Tickets everywhere. This is going to be amazing." I should have figured Monty would take charge like this. I looked at Jeff to see if he agreed with this idea or if it was a trick. He looked back at me and gave me his wonderful smile, filled with charm and real joy. It was the kind of smile that could impress anyone. And so it was set to happen. I went home and reviewed my material, picking out some of the pieces I thought were the weakest. By weakest, I meant the ones I believed wouldn't work. They just didn't seem funny to me, especially after my last performance didn't go well. I had 15 pages of what I thought was barely laughable content, and I sent it to Monty. He returned 10 pages, and it was hard to understand what he had changed. However, I got the main idea by the end. I spent the week practicing after my college classes, trying my best with what I had. I combined his notes with my best 10 minutes of jokes and felt ready when the time came. Meanwhile, Monty was creating buzz about the show. There was a lot of excitement. The honor of the Northwestern Communications Department was on the line. People stopped me in the halls to wish me luck. Both venues were sold out and tickets were being sold for more than their face value, thanks to Monty. Even some of the teachers mentioned they would attend. Monty had arranged to video the whole event since camera phones didn't exist yet. This way, I could see his performance, and he could see mine afterward. Honestly, I was curious to see his take on my material and if I could learn anything from it. Well, there I was, completely unaware of the tough competition ahead. The show went well. I thought I did great. There was a lot of laughter and applause. I had never experienced anything like it before. If I hadn't been convinced before, I was now. It was amazing. People were patting me on the back and offering to buy me a drink. It felt wonderful. Then I went home, wondering how Monty had done. When Monty returned, he couldn't look me in the eye, which told me that it wasn't good news for me. He grabbed a drink, plopped down on his bed, and took a long sip before saying, "I'm sorry, Ben. You were good, but he was better." I just sat there staring at him. "How much better? Does it really matter?" he replied. "I guess it does." There was a deep sigh. "Yeah, it does. Tell me." "Are you sure you want to know?" "It was my material. I deserve to know." "I don't know, man. It was the same material, but it didn't feel the same. The strange thing is, your parts were the best by far. You could clearly see what was yours and what wasn't. Somehow he took your work and made it more polished. His timing was perfect and his expressions were spot on. He really hit it out of the park." I sat there staring at my shoes, my mind blank. "Look, you were really good too. Honestly, I've never seen you perform better. But I have to go with the results, Ben. He was better. I'm really sorry." That was the end of the discussion. I just finished my beer and lay down on my bed. Monty had clearly been drinking. He was fast asleep and snoring loudly. I stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what had happened. Sure, Monty was good, but I was good too, right? There was space for more than one comedian. My life wasn't over, except it felt like it was. The next day, I got up, took a shower, and went to school. No one looked me in the eye. I heard a few quick "sorry, man" remarks as people walked by, but that was all. Even the teachers avoided calling on me. I could tell I wasn't in anyone's good books. That night, Monty and I sat down to watch Jeff's performance. I hated every moment of it. Deep down, I knew he was better. He brought my material to life in a way I hadn't seen. He paused where I wouldn't. He let the jokes breathe when I rushed through. It was hard to take, and I didn't laugh at all, not that anyone expected me to, given how I felt. I was in a funk for the next month. I struggled in my classes. I passed, but just barely. I didn't try hard, and it showed. Most days, I stayed in our small room replaying Jeff's performance, taking notes on what he did. Even Monty gave me some space after trying to get me to go out with him for a few nights. I wasn't interested, and made that clear. As for how I finally got out of that slump, well, Jeff has shared that story many times on different shows. His version isn't quite right, so here's how it really went. There was a knock at the door, and I didn't want to answer it. Then I heard a high-pitched voice say, "Candygram! Candygram for Mongo!" Of course, I had to open the door for that. Blazing Saddles is such a classic. It's amazing it was made at all. Jeff stood outside holding a 12-pack of beer. He's always been a bit of a tightwad. "Are you busy?" he asked as he walked into the room I shared with Monty. I never understood why he asked that. I stayed by the door, watching him flop onto the bed, opening a can of beer and saying, "Come in, why don't you? Oh, wait, you already did." "What are we watching?" he asked, glancing at the TV. "Wait, is that my performance?" He looked confused. "Why are you watching this? Don't get me wrong, I did great, but why? Oh, right, getting some tips, I get it." He even made finger quotes around tips. At that moment, I felt frustrated. "You really want to know?" I asked him. "Sure," he replied, leaning back and gulping down more beer. What can I say about Jeff Klondike? The guy could really drink, and what's really frustrating is he never gained any weight. Fine. I clenched my teeth and sat on the edge of the bed. I rewound the tape and grabbed a drink for myself before starting it. Then I broke it down. I found something to critique in almost every second of his set, pausing to highlight things on the screen. I pointed out all the ways he could improve, where he should have paused or moved differently, and the moments in the story that could have landed better. I went through everything I could think of after watching it many times. Just like I had to be honest about my own work, he had to accept my feedback. It was clear to him. I even showed him how to improve his performance using my material. I did this because I was frustrated with his laid-back attitude as if he didn't need to try. But he really did. And then, once he really put in the effort, he would be unstoppable. That was the hardest thing to accept. He knew it too. After I shared everything I wanted to say, he simply mentioned, "Wow, that was incredible. I haven't even watched your set yet." Great. By this time, we had both enjoyed about 5 drinks each, and I had to take a quick break. When I returned, he was watching the show again, this time with more focus. "So," he started, in the way that tipsy people do. Wondering. Wondering what? I asked, opening another drink. "So, I hear you've given up on performing?" I stared at him in shock. He wasn't even in the Northwestern program, yet he somehow knew I was not putting in much effort. I must have been slacking off more than I realized. "What if we partnered up? You write and critique while we practice together. You help me improve. Honestly, your stuff is better than mine. Together, we would be a great team. Sure, you might not be performing as much, but from what I hear, you've stepped back from that anyway. We could team up 50-50 or 60-40. You write, help me get better, I perform. We all benefit. Just like the famous partnership of Elton John and Bernie Taupin. What do you think?" And that, dear reader, is how the Black Cloud Klondike partnership began. Just like that. Yes, Black Cloud is important, even if you don't know about the partnership. I didn't answer him right away, but thought about it for a few days. I talked to Monty and some of the teachers. They all said the same thing. I was good, but he was great. Together, we could be amazing. But I shouldn't give up my degree. I should finish that first. I could write for the next year and see if I could match his success. If I could, the future could be exactly how I wanted it. How great it would be depended on how hard we both worked. The problem was, I didn't really know him. I had met him briefly once, seen 2 of his stand-up shows, and had one wild night where I tried to criticize him to feel better about myself. Did I really want to partner with someone I didn't know well? So I decided the best thing to do was get to know him better. I called him and invited him over to work on some material together. The more we did that, the more I would learn about him. Or I could just ask him directly. When he came over for the first time, he brought beer since Monty was out that night. He mentioned something about a dance show. I asked him straight up about himself. It was important for me to know him better to create the right material for him. "What do you want to know?" he asked with a smile, opening a can of beer. We were stepping up our beer choices slowly. "I don't know. What do you want to share?" I replied, turning the question back to him. He scratched his chin, took a sip, thought for a moment, and then said, "Well, I have 2 brothers, one older and one younger, and a young sister who was a surprise. I'm 24. I moved out 3 years ago. I've always wanted to succeed in comedy. My heroes are comedians like Richard Pryor and George Carlin. I loved their albums when I was growing up. I really don't like boring physical comedy. The Three Stooges and Mr. Bean are not for me. Stand-up comedy is tough, but if you can do it, you can do anything. I'm not into acting in movies, but I wouldn't turn down a TV show if it was designed for me. I enjoy political humor and like to poke fun at both sides. I dislike people who are against others for their identity, respect women, don't see myself having kids, and I don't want to work in a place like a strip club. My first girlfriend was a dancer, and I saw what it was like, and it wasn't good." He took a deep breath and had another sip. "What else do you want to know?" Let me think. Are there any topics you wouldn't want to touch? Like religion or anything else?" I asked, intrigued. I often preferred to avoid certain topics, but you never know what others want to discuss. "Not really. I wouldn't intentionally pick a fight over things, but if it's in the news, I might speak up. I don't want to be unkind just for fun, but I also won't hesitate to say what I think, you know? I see. So, you're okay with making a few enemies along the way? Well, it didn't hurt Rosie O'Donnell, did it? Good point. If you have a touring show, are you thinking about a theme? He scratched his head. What do you mean? When big comedians go on tour, they often have a name for it, usually centered around something. A main idea they want to share. The jokes or stories connect to that idea. Sometimes it's more obvious than others, but the most successful ones have a clear talking point for interviews and such. I did have some knowledge on this. I hadn't really thought of that. Right now, I'm just going show to show, trying to find what works, he replied honestly. At least he was sincere. We can think about that later. It's not something you have to decide right now, I said. What about your family? Can you share stories about them? Will they be upset? He shrugged. I'm not that close with them, to be honest. My parents are true hippies, and they couldn't wait for us to move out so they could go back to their old ways. Last I heard, they were living in a commune in Minnesota. I made a mental note. That sounded like a rich topic to explore. So, do you want to tell jokes? Share puns? Be more of a storyteller? What do you enjoy the most? This was getting to the important stuff. A comedian's talent lies in how comfortable they feel doing what they love. There are different ways to be funny. Some tell jokes. Some share stories with humor woven in. Others observe life and point out its oddities. Bill Cosby was known for that. Eddie Murphy mixes storytelling with traditional jokes. Tim Allen portrays a real man who often makes mistakes. He plays a character just like Larry the Cable Guy. Interestingly, he sounds quite different when he's not in character. You can check out Daniel Whitney on YouTube, which is Larry's real name, and see him talk in his normal voice. I've met him a few times, and he's genuinely nice. Some famous comedians aren't as kind. They can be a bit entitled after being in the spotlight for so long and might lack patience with those they think are not doing their jobs well. Steve Martin is someone who is fine to be around if he knows you and appreciates you. If not, it's best to not stay in his line of sight for too long. So who was Jeff Kay? And how were we going to change his image? I did some research and found a character from a website called Something Awful. We wanted Jeff to be nothing like that character. We tried different names, the Klondike, J.K. Jeffrey with various styles, but none felt right. None really represented Jeff. He was just himself. He didn't care about much and often ignored rules. He liked to have a good time and had a carefree attitude. One night, during a performance with a small group of fans following him around Chicago, a joke we thought would be funny didn't land. Jeff stood in front of the crowd, looking disappointed, and sighed. Well, that didn't work, did it? He glanced over at me in the wings and gestured. Let's just end that bit, right, Hairbrush? I rolled my eyes as he turned back to the audience. Sorry, folks. Trying out some new stuff. Sometimes it doesn't always go well. Then someone from the crowd shouted, It's okay, Clonkers, we love you anyway. That night, the name Clonkers stuck. We also experimented with Jeff's appearance. Comics often start with a unique look and then change over time. Some don't change at all. For example, Larry the Cable Guy has a specific style, and Jerry Seinfeld often wears suits. We tried everything with Jeff. Sweaters and slacks, shirts and jeans, various types of suits. We even presented him with a flashy suit right before a show, but he was having none of it. He had arrived in jeans, a t-shirt, a Hawaiian shirt, and a baseball cap. After taking one look at the suit, he said, No, we are done, and stuck with his casual outfit, which became his signature look. When someone finds success, brands often try to get them to wear their clothes for gigs, offering big money for a spot on a show. But Jeff wore whatever he liked and felt comfortable in. I also found out that Jeff was quite loyal and usually had everything in order. He wasn't messy. He had a tidy apartment by the river in Chicago, and generally he was punctual. He drank a lot back then, but didn't we all? We lived on energy, soda, snacks, and takeout. These days it's different, but back then we didn't worry about calories. We stayed away from harder drugs because we had seen how bad cocaine could be in the late 80s. His sense of humor was a bit rough and sharp for most people. He couldn't show his true self unless he was sure you could handle it. It took him some time to relax around me, and together with his agent Maury, we were probably the two people who understood him the best. Yes, his agent. And mine too, in a way. After I finished my degree, we had some local success and took a few trips to Wisconsin and Indiana. We started getting repeat bookings. I thought I could stick with this for at least another year to see what happened. I wasn't getting any other offers. Second City talked to me about being a stage manager, but that felt more like babysitting. While I knew many people got their start there, working with Jeff felt more real and in our control. By the end of that first year, I could manage the requests for gigs that came in, but I quickly realized I didn't have the skills or connections to get gigs for Jeff. We needed an agent. That's when we met Maury Slocum. We found him at a gig in Detroit where he was negotiating for another act. We watched him as he skillfully convinced the club owner, and after our show, we took him out to dinner. He liked our act and decided to work with us. Maury was fantastic. He took care of the things I couldn't manage. This freed me up to focus on writing and other tasks. I soon learned I had to handle the extra responsibilities because venue owners expected us to know what we were doing, and at first, I didn't. But I picked it up quickly. I keep saying us, but really, Jeff was the one with the talent on stage. Behind the scenes, though, it was a different story. Jeff recognized this from the start. He understood he needed my writing skills because, while his material was decent, it wasn't enough to help him reach his big goals. As I mentioned, he was aware of his strengths. He recognized a good partnership when he saw one in me. He was open to sharing decisions and the work involved in creating our act. I later learned that money wasn't his main motivation, even though he liked having it. He enjoyed not worrying about where his next paycheck would come from, or if he could pay the mortgage on his downtown apartment, which he bought when he started making good money. But for him, it was never just about money. It was the excitement of performing and hearing people laugh. He didn't care about using money to keep score. As long as he had what he needed to do what he loved, that was enough. His choice was to keep doing stand-up comedy rather than pursue movies or other options. Many people talk about performers, especially actors, who find their worth through how others see them. When you feel that way, you try to stay in the spotlight so that people are always talking about you. If they aren't, it feels like you don't matter. The industry can be full of insecurities and issues, but after working with Jeff for a long time, I don't think he was driven by insecurity. He was sure of who he was inside. He loved getting up in front of an audience, saying silly things, making funny faces, and moving around to entertain people. He needed their laughter like he needed air. But it was for all the right reasons, not because he thought he was worthless without their attention. He enjoyed making people's lives a little brighter and more fun, helping them smile even if they had a rough day. He often said that performing felt less like a job and more like a responsibility. His easygoing attitude about money was clear when a few issues came up with our first contract. When we began, we didn't have much money at all. We couldn't hire entertainment lawyers, who were mostly in Los Angeles anyway. We went to a regular lawyer to set up a contract because we knew we needed to make our partnership official, and we even formed a company, BK Entertainment Inc., where my name came first. We owned it 50-50. The contract stated that all money earned would be split 40-60, with Jeff getting the larger share. He wanted to show that my decision to step back from performing was important, and ensure I felt comfortable knowing I would still be compensated well. He wanted me to know he valued my contributions to his success. He was the face of the show and did earn a bit more, but I was okay with that. It was a nice gesture, and it worked well while he was just a stand-up comedian since I was right there next to him. But when Maury got him a TV show opportunity, I wasn't involved in that. While I was Jeff's manager and writing partner, my role wasn't really necessary, and they were doing well without my writing, thanks anyway. I offered my help, but they kindly and firmly declined. It seemed that writing for TV was quite different from doing stand-up. However, since I had a contract, I was entitled to 40% of everything he made. Maury suggested that Jeff start a new company for his TV and movie deals, where he could keep all the money, well, 85% since 15% goes to the agent. To his credit, Jeff said no. He realized that if he did that, I would step away from the main project, and that would leave him in a tough spot. Still, I could tell he had some doubts about me getting 40% from something I didn't work on. So, in the end, I called a meeting and verbally stated that I wouldn't claim the money. He could just keep it. It meant less for me, but I was okay with it. I was already earning more than I expected, and missing out on a few $100,000 from that show didn't bother me. My pride was intact, Jeff was well compensated, and Maury felt he was doing his job by helping us find a solution, even though it was my suggestion. No new companies had to be set up, and we didn't need to change our contracts. The TV show actually had a fun idea. Jeff wasn't too keen on doing TV unless it was shaped around him, like the shows of Jerry Seinfeld and Tim Allen. After a few years performing on big stages, TV came to him with a pitch that combined elements from Father Ted, a hilarious British show about some older, cheeky priests, and Heaven Can Wait, the classic movie with Warren Beatty. The story involved a bumbling angel who mistakenly pulled an angry radio DJ out of his life before he was supposed to die. But it turned out that he wasn't going to die, and the angel had acted too soon. When this was realized, the higher-ups tried to send him back, but his body had been cremated, thinking he was really gone. Instead of returning him to his body, they pushed his mind into the priest who was conducting his funeral. However, the priest already had his own thoughts and feelings. This led to a struggle between the two for control of the shared body. The show was titled Life is for the Living, and it quickly became a success. It was a funny setup, featuring a priest who suddenly displayed a wild side, wanting to drink and have fun. Throughout the series, the two personalities learned to appreciate each other and found ways to coexist. The script was crafted specifically for Jeff and highlighted his talents perfectly. He ended up with a woman sidekick, the not-so-helpful angel who caused it all, and only he and those in trouble could see her. This led to many one-sided talks and plenty of comical moments. I had nothing to do with it and just watched the episodes like everyone else. I visited the soundstage a few times and attended some parties, but that was it. So what did I actually do? I mostly helped create the Clonkers character, figured out his voice with Jeff, and wrote a lot. I also took care of everything else Jeff needed for his shows. I was half manager and half writer. As I mentioned before, putting on a show takes a lot of work. There are many details to ensure everything goes smoothly. Going to a comedy club is simple. They have lighting experts and know how everything should work since the stage is set. But when you perform in a theater, it requires more effort. They might have lights and sound people, but they won't know your specific needs. They may have just hosted a different play the week before and have no idea about your show. I have to arrange for a portable stage set to be built if they don't have one. I also need to discuss with the lighting expert where the lights should go. Are we recording this? If yes, where should the cameras be set up? Who hires the camera crew and the portable recording studio? Who will edit the final video? We need to set up the nights we will work. How much practice time do we need? How many special tickets will we give to local radio stations or community leaders? Where do we sell the merchandise? And what will we sell? Where do we get that merchandise? How do we get Jeff on local TV or radio to promote the show? There are so many details to decide and organize, and all of them fell on me. But the challenges become much bigger when you put on a show in a stadium or a place not designed for such events. Now you must hire lighting specialists who build structures to hold the lights and get people to operate them. Stadiums usually do not have this equipment available. You don't need that for a football or baseball game. You have to hire all the people to manage the audience, security staff, and someone to oversee them, even though they are often already part of the venue. Badges need to be made. Sound equipment and speakers must be organized, along with someone to set everything up and ensure it works. You also need to arrange floor coverings. Have you ever considered that most people sitting on the main floor of a large stadium are actually sitting on grass? You need to take care of that grass without hurting it. Then, you have to rent chairs for people to sit on the grass, and someone needs to put them out and collect them at the end of the night. You also need to build a stage, set up large LED screens on the sides, and make sure everything works for the event. There are countless tiny details to manage. You even need to hire people to watch over the bathrooms to make sure no one is causing trouble. It's odd, but this can happen, especially at comedy shows. We even had jokes about it in one of Jeff's routines. Now imagine trying to do all of this in another country. We don't often perform in places where they don't speak English, but we've done some shows in the Netherlands, France, and Spain since Netflix reaches many people. While many people there can speak English, I can't. So organizing these events abroad means making a lot of early morning or late night calls. It's a bit exhausting. And then there's the writing. I enjoy it, and I'm good at it. Jeff always brings new ideas to my words that I never thought of. It's exciting to see my words transformed in ways I hadn't imagined. We did this for almost 10 years before things changed, before certain women came into the picture. About those women. Oh, the women. I should clarify that we weren't single before these women appeared. Not at all. A working comedian getting laughs can almost hear the excitement as he steps on stage. Oddly enough, I was better at meeting women than Jeff was. It was strange, but he didn't have much charm. To be fair, once we started doing well, he didn't really need any. Still, he struggled to talk to women and didn't always know what to say. When a woman would speak to him, he often turned into a character he played. I wondered if he thought that was what they wanted or if he just didn't know what to do. Probably a bit of both. But I can tell you that hearing the same jokes you wrote years ago get repeated to a new audience can be tiring. It wouldn't bother me so much, but he kept picking the same jokes over and over. As for me, since I wasn't on stage and famous, I had to put in some effort. When I was on my own, I played up the image of someone who understood the secrets of the land, a role that seemed to work for me. It was easy to make love seem like a big mystery. A few hints, some cautious words, a lot of simple sayings, and some quiet, intense looks made it all feel special. But really, there isn't any secret knowledge. We, as people, often struggle with love and relationships just like everyone else does. But women didn't see it that way, and I wasn't going to clarify that. You use the advantages you have. I quickly learned to avoid talking about Jeff or my job. Mentioning them would surely lead to, what's he really like? Which would jump to, can I meet him? That would ruin the night for sure. But if I was out with Jeff, who loved to relax after a gig at a club or a bar, it was a different story. In that case, people would ask, do you want to meet him? And I would take a back seat. It was a bit embarrassing because he didn't have to work to attract attention while I had to put in effort, and when I finally succeeded, if he was alone, that was the end. I learned quickly to only go for it if he was already with someone. That was the best situation because I could introduce the girl I was talking to. Russell Howard taught me that phrase, by the way, and she could see what was happening and would often turn back to me. It was all very situation-based, but it worked for us. And let me tell you, only staying in one place for a few days helped prevent anyone from getting too attached. It wasn't that we disliked women. We just had priorities, and our careers came first. We were connected in many ways. I didn't want him to decide we had to settle down, just as he didn't want that for me. To be clear, being a comedian, whether just starting out or successful, means travel is a big part of the job. It's just the way it is. Like musicians in the beginning, travel is key for gaining exposure. Bands focus on their albums and tours help with sales. But for a comedian, the performance is the main product. While you can record shows, the truth is, most people watch those videos just a couple of times, unlike music that can play all day without getting old. There are two types of comedian tours. One is the let's find work type, which is what you do when you're trying to make it. The reality is, there often isn't enough work in one place for a full-time career as a comedian. People who don't want to travel often end up working at local clubs. If you want to get noticed, traveling is important. The more places you visit, the better. Perform at clubs, do local TV shows, and find any way to get in front of others. The more clubs you perform at, the more people will come to know your name. It may not always be obvious, but if you show up on TV, folks will think, oh, I remember that person. They'll share that with others. It makes them more likely to watch you again, especially if they've seen you before. It's an interesting cycle, but it works. Comedy clubs need fresh talent with new jokes to keep customers coming back. There is always a need for new comedians. Another part is preparing for a tour. Many comedians try new material in smaller clubs while on the road. They want to polish it before performing for larger crowds. A ticket to a big show can cost $60 to $70 or more, with the best seats priced even higher. If someone is paying that much, they expect a great performance. If the material isn't well rehearsed, it can spoil the show. It's a known fact that a comedian can get away with only a few bad jokes before the audience loses interest. If an audience stops enjoying the show, especially in a big tour with high stakes, it may be a long time before they get invited back. So it's crucial to make sure every joke is good before going out there. How do you do that? You perform at smaller venues, usually ones that fit around 300 people. The more often you can do this, the better. You get to test new jokes, experiment with how you tell them, and learn from different crowds. Each audience is unique. One night, a tough news story might put everyone in a serious mood, making some jokes fall flat. New jokes need time to develop. I can come up with many ideas, but they have to fit together smoothly. Timing, facial expressions, and connections between jokes all matter. This takes practice, and it must be done before a big tour. A major tour can be exhausting. With smaller gigs, you travel to a city, perform at a couple of clubs over a few nights, and then return home. But on tour, you might not return for weeks or even months. Because of this, having a relationship is tricky unless you find someone very understanding. You don't want a partner who will complain about your absence. In such a situation, you need a supportive partner, and that understanding might only come after you achieve significant success in your career. At that time, while traveling was still a possibility, especially when getting ready for a big tour, you would handle these events every few years, not every week like you do when you are just starting out. For some comedians, the aim is to appear on TV or in movies. This way you get to go home every night, and it's quite profitable. However, the downside is that you begin to drift away from being a stand-up comedian performing regularly. The only comedian I have seen balance live gigs and TV well is Tim Allen, but even he eventually stopped touring. Jay Leno also did stand-up while hosting The Tonight Show. I heard he was able to live off the money he made from gigs while saving his Tonight Show earnings for car purchases. In my opinion, with TV and movies, you have a team trying to keep you content, and you can start to believe your own hype. When you're out on the road, sometimes you find yourself getting ready in small bathrooms. You see a mix of hotel rooms, some not very nice. It reminds you that you can't expect the world to support you without hard work. But that's just my view. I'm not the person on stage trying to meet everyone's expectations for 2 hours. So what do I know? It took us 8 years to get noticed, and then we received an invitation to appear on a popular talk show. It was a big deal, Jimmy Kimmel. It's hard to get bigger than that. Although I learned later that being on Graham Norton in the UK is also a major opportunity. They discuss topics there that would be surprising on US shows. Jeff got to be on that show once and returned to the hotel quite tipsy, as they actually serve real drinks to guests on set. That would never happen back home. He had a 5-minute spot on Kimmel, and I was backstage enjoying the atmosphere. There were some wonderful moments shared with our family that night. We felt great about it. This led to invitations for a few game shows, which is terrific for getting noticed. We believed we had 6 months to ride the wave of excitement and then launch a national tour. I didn't fully understand the amount of work ahead, though I knew from other managers that we needed to do it, but also hire help. So, we did. It took 6 months of performing in smaller clubs to gather enough material for a 90-minute show that we both felt confident about. Now let me tell you, organizing a big tour costs a lot. It's not just about reserving a venue and paying later. You have to pay up front. We needed nearly $10 million to fund our first tour, which we jokingly called the Can We Do This Tour. Officially, it was known as the An Insecure Man Tour. Here's something else we discovered. Streaming services like Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu, they don't want to know about a special project until you've already had a successful tour. So much for thinking it would work that way. Later, we found out they don't pay you in advance only after you finish the project. All the risk is on us. In the end, the only group interested in us was Sky News from Europe, which was surprising, but we didn't question it. They covered half our costs, and we had to take out a loan for the rest, which was quite a hassle. Have you ever gone to a bank and asked for a loan for a tour? No security? And as a Native American, it's tough. Take my advice. Avoid it if you can. We ended up getting a loan from a Saudi bank, which bothered me a lot, but we couldn't find money from anyone else, so we took it. Fortunately, the tour was a huge success. We made 3 times what it cost to put on the show, so we paid back the loan, covered some interest, and I took home 40%. Sky got its exclusive story, which helped us gain recognition in Europe, so everything turned out well. We also got paid for the special project, too. We had made it. Now people were inviting us instead of us searching for opportunities. It was an exciting moment, and there were some nights in Vegas that I can't remember too clearly. One thing I appreciated about Jeff was that, even though he drank a lot, he didn't use drugs, as I mentioned before. Not even stimulants, as Jim Carrey calls them. It's interesting how some people's stimulants come in small baggies and aren't prescribed. I choose to stay away from drugs too. Early on, we tried some weed and edibles, but we quickly stopped. You can't do your best work when you're high. You might think you've created something funny, but the next day you see it for what it really is. So we cut back, and I was happy about that. I've seen many Native Americans struggle with alcohol and drugs, so I steer clear of them. It's not for me, and it won't be. Now back to the travels. You get the idea that we moved around a lot. It's part of the job, like I explained. Sometimes you need to understand why we do what we do. People often ask questions about the background in stories like this, but I think it's important to explain our motivations. It helps prevent questions later on. As a result, while there were willing people wherever we went, we both made sure to stay safe and used protection. We didn't need any health issues from casual encounters or to deal with any surprises later. So while we enjoyed some company, we were smart about it and cared for our own well-being. I learned a lot during this time, that's for sure. What each woman wants can be very different. Sometimes she might not even realize what it is, or she does know but won't admit it. I often heard the phrase, "only bad women do that," even though deep down she might wish you would. She just can't allow herself to feel that way and look at herself later. Both Jeff and I made an effort to avoid women who were married, but I was more careful than he was. Jeff would check for rings but wouldn't ask any questions. As for me, I would ask and try to learn more. I didn't want to step into someone else's relationship. I know it sounds old-fashioned to say a woman belongs to another man, but I feel it's about respecting someone else's commitment. If I were ever married, I would want that same respect. There were times when I was talking to a woman and things were going well, but then Jeff would show up. It could be at the same club or just to say hello, and suddenly the attention would shift to him, and I was forgotten. It was never done on purpose. Sometimes Jeff would check in and ask, "Is this okay? You aren't upset, are you?" And that question was tough to answer. If I said yes, he would stop, but I knew that would ruin my chances with her, so it was easier for me to agree and look for someone else if there was time. Jeff never meant to hurt me. It was just how our dynamic worked because of his popularity. Even with those situations, I enjoyed my time. I didn't feel bitter about Jeff receiving attention instead of me. The truth is, the more popular he became, the harder things got for him. There are levels of fame that people may not understand unless they've experienced it. Jeff couldn't go to the movies without making arrangements ahead of time, or else his presence would draw too much attention and distract from the film. People would approach him for selfies or autographs, wanting to chat or be friends with a celebrity. He even had trouble going grocery shopping because he worried that paparazzi might be around. Buying a new phone wasn't easy for him either. Many employees at phone stores were too curious and could easily find and share personal information. Still, while these are first-world problems, the bright side is that he could get a table at any restaurant he wanted, often without having to pay. When we were struggling, we had to cover our own bills. Now that we had some money, everything felt different. It was a strange situation. Jeff, my friend, had a habit of giving away free meals at restaurants. He would spot families nearby and pay for their meal using his own comped dinner. This way, he could feel like a good guy and enjoy a meal without feeling like he was taking advantage of his success. However, Jeff needed to be careful with his words. This was a big challenge for him. He had to think about the people he trusted and formed relationships with. Anyone he dated who wasn't wealthy would make people wonder about their intentions. This made those old friends of his, including me, even more important. As Jeff became more successful, he leaned on me more. We had a bond built on trust until things changed, and I soon realized the reason. Once again, it had to do with a woman. Honestly, neither of us was aware of it at first. Jeff wasn't a bad person. He simply didn't think about how his actions affected others. Women were drawn to him, and he would pursue them without a second thought. If he had considered the feelings of those around him, he would have been upset with the impact of his actions. I don't think he was a bad person. He just didn't connect his choices to their effects. He was focused on the present moment and often ignored everything else. While traveling together, though I didn't go on every trip, there were often women around. Some trips were more about maintaining appearances, but if new material was being tested, I needed to be there to discuss how it went, adjust what was needed, and refine the presentation. Looking back, I feel a bit ashamed about some of those experiences. There's a saying that boys will be boys, but I think that can excuse poor behavior and overlook how actions impact others. Sometimes, when men feel there's no one watching, they may act out in ways they normally wouldn't. They say that character shows when no one is around. In that case, we weren't the best examples. We accepted what was offered to us, and as I mentioned before, we tried to be smart and not mislead anyone, while also looking out for ourselves. But I admit, we did enjoy ourselves quite a bit. We even had some routines to make things easier the next morning. For example, no matter what time we woke up after a show, if there was a girl in either of our beds, we would roll over, check our phones, and then say, "Oh no!" and explain that we had a flight to catch for the next gig and needed to hurry. It didn't matter if we actually had a flight or not. Our flights were always scheduled for the afternoon because, like me, Jeff is not a morning person. Usually this would make the girl jump up, quickly shower if she had time, get dressed, and leave. The most awkward part was when someone asked for a phone number. I didn't like to give fake numbers because that felt mean, but I also didn't want to receive constant calls from women saying, "I'm coming to town, let's meet up." We often didn't even remember their names. It was especially tricky if they planned to visit Chicago and expected to stay with us. So we would give them the number of our secondary phone. It was a real number, but we only checked it once a week and mostly ignored it. I would explain that both Jeff and I were busy, that it didn't get checked often, and that we probably wouldn't answer requests for tickets or other things. If we responded, the number would get out and we'd be overwhelmed with calls. Some girls didn't believe it, and a few looked disappointed or got upset. We would have to say, "I really enjoyed last night, but I'm traveling a lot and not looking for a relationship right now." There was no need to be rude about it, even if some reacted sharply. In those moments, the thought of our departing flight usually helped to settle any drama. Either way, we had our fun. We had some adventures, sometimes even spending time with multiple women at once. We engaged in silly antics in the backstage bathrooms at shows, and we learned a lot about the personal interests of the women we met. We even made up our own version of that song with all the women's names in it, a pretty silly thing to do, looking back. But then again, hindsight offers a clear view, doesn't it? Sometimes you don't realize how unpleasant you are until you look back. Take Wendy from Rolling Hills. She had her own ways, but preferred things to happen without asking. Then there was Polly from San Francisco. If she wore underwear, it meant she had just been with someone, as it kept things tidy. Shannon from Minneapolis. Paul was known for her boldness and often caught people by surprise afterward. Jenny from LA would speak harshly while being close, leaving you puzzled about her feelings, only to later cuddle and say nice things. Then I met Monica. There's always that one person who grabs your attention and seems perfect for you. I think the idea that there's just one person for everyone is not true. I believe there are many people out there, depending on who you are and your mood when you meet them. If you're open at that moment and you find someone interesting, that's how connections can start. Once you begin to feel attracted to someone, you often focus on their positive traits and overlook the not-so-great ones. You might ignore what doesn't fit with your idea of them. Whether that idea is right or wrong, Monica appeared at just the right time, and she seemed to think I was a good match too. Monica Whitaker worked as a journalist for the Sun-Times in Chicago, covering weekend events. She had arranged to interview me instead of my partner, Jeff. She had done her homework and knew we worked as equals, which intrigued her. She had already interviewed Jeff 2 years before and now wanted to know more about me. What was my role? How did we work together? The interview took an unexpected turn because I felt playful that morning. Jeff was in Minnesota for a comedy event, so he couldn't share his opinions, which I think was what she wanted. We met at a coffee shop in Aurora, though I couldn't tell you why. It was a nice little coffee shop off the main road, right by the river that flows through the city. I hadn't spent much time in Aurora before, but I liked it. I got there early, sitting outside in the spring sunshine. Thankfully, it wasn't raining when she walked in and sat down across from me at the small round table. I guessed she was about 5'9". We had met before, but I hadn't really paid much attention. She looked around 125 pounds. Her brown hair was long and shiny, reaching her shoulders. It was thick and a lovely chestnut color. She wore a jacket since the weather was sunny but still a bit chilly, so I couldn't see much of her figure yet. Her outfit looked nice with slim jeans. "Mr. Black Cloud," she said, extending her hand. How are you this morning? I'm doing well, I replied, quoting George Carlin. Feeling great, in fact. She tried to hide a smile. I see, she said seriously. Well, let's see what we can do about that. She took out a small recorder from her bag, adjusted it, and placed it on the table. Let me get a coffee first, she said, and stood up to order. I couldn't help but notice how she walked away. Taking the chance, I talked into the recorder, pretending I was on a call. Hey, Jeff, I'm in an interview. Yeah, she's pretty. Wait, what? No way, that's not going to happen. Look, skydiving naked is not what the Mile High Club means. No, I won't send you pictures. I'm not going to embarrass her. No, just no. Oh, all right then. I'll consider it if she agrees. Gotta go, she's coming back. It was all a little playful, and maybe it would make her smile later. After all, I was a comedy writer. She returned with her coffee, gave me a bright smile, and flipped her hair back to show me she was wearing an AirPod. Oh. A monkey and a car battery? She asked. I smiled sheepishly. His idea, not mine. You usually need to answer your phone to have a conversation, she said, now grinning widely. She had a beautiful smile, with dimples that made her face light up. I felt a bit embarrassed. Fine, I said, trying to stay calm. I was just trying to make conversation, I added, feeling uncomfortable. She laughed, and it was easy to see she was enjoying herself. I'm not going to get into details about that, she said, shaking her head. I mean, how would that even work? What does a car battery have to do with a monkey? What role does the monkey play here? I really want to find out. Maybe I should look this up. Is someone using the battery? That sounds uncomfortable. How is that enticing? These were sincere questions. I tried to change the topic. You could probably find answers online. I'm too much of a gentleman to share those kinds of details with you, I said, keeping a serious face. But what about that recording device? I shrugged. There didn't seem to be a good answer for that. She leaned back and studied me thoughtfully. You aren't what I expected, that's for sure, she said, tilting her head. I took the bait. What were you expecting? Well, let's see, she replied, pulling out a notebook. Third in your class at Northwestern Communications. Part of the Navajo tribe, though it seems you aren't too eager to talk about it. You want to do stage work, but after that incident with your client, you became more of a background player, only assisting him, writing for him, sharing the workload. You travel a lot. No serious relationship, but you have some short-term flings while you're on the road. She made air quotes when she said short-term flings. I would have loved to know who mentioned that. You have a nice 3-bedroom apartment just west of the Loop here in Chicago, a brother back at the tribe, you visit your parents regularly, you are definitely not gay, and you have great hair. Am I right? I nodded, but added, that still doesn't really explain what you expected, does it? She felt quiet for a moment and then said, honestly, I'll leave this part out of the interview, but I imagined you more like a follower. I mean, it's rare in the comedy world to see someone have such a close bond with the talent without having some sort of advantage. But you're not like that, are you? You really want to help him succeed. I just shrugged. I didn't know how to respond without sounding self-centered. I didn't like the idea that I was just there to enhance Jeff's success, no matter how accurate it might be. But why? My notes say you didn't know Jeff at all before that competition, and then suddenly you're inseparable? Why did you set aside your own dreams to help him achieve his? She was determined and curious. I sighed. I disliked discussing this topic with anyone, even my family. Trying to explain was tough. Most people didn't understand, and things rarely looked good when everything was laid out. Honestly, he's just better at performing than I was. It's really that simple. The truth is, Jeff has his faults and weaknesses. I think he would agree with me on that. Jeff is down to earth and aware of his shortcomings, and he knows that I help cover them up. If we were on our own, we would both be okay stand-up comedians, but probably not much more. Together, though, we create something special, even if I say so myself. We've found success, so it shows. I'm not trying to be boastful, just explaining why I support Jeff's skills over my own. He shines on stage, and that's what matters. But I play a part in making him better. I paused, careful with my words. I didn't want to speak badly of Jeff. He would see this interview. I also needed to answer the question without too much, he's not good at this, and I'm great at that. Fans prefer their heroes to be well-rounded and talented in everything. Both Jeff and I have hopes and dreams. We both understand that working together makes us more likely to reach those dreams. So we collaborate. I do my part and he does his, and we meet at all the right moments. I hoped she would catch on, but she didn't. She had good instincts, but needed more experience. She sensed I was avoiding something intriguing, but did not understand to let it go. Where exactly do you fit in? What do you do that he struggles with? Why does he need you, plainly? She leaned in, looking curiously. I hope you don't mind, but I'm not going to answer that. Not because there isn't something, but out of respect for my partner. That question, especially how you asked it, could upset our fans and our relationship, so I'm going to pass on that. I was firm. If it made the interview more tense, so be it. He was my partner, she was a journalist. My loyalty was to him. She thought about my answer and then nodded. Fair enough. I understand your point. I apologize for being so curious, but that is part of my job. I had to ask. I shrugged. I get it, but you are asking about a long-standing relationship built on respect, and there's only so much I'm willing to share. I hope you understand that. She nodded and smiled briefly, recognizing my position. So you and he are said to be quite the popular duo when you're traveling. Any thoughts on that? I smiled. A gentleman never shares all the details. But shares pictures, apparently, she joked. Touché, I replied. So definitely not romantic partners, as some have claimed. She timed her question perfectly, just as I took a sip of my coffee, causing me to spill it. What? I exclaimed. No, that's not it at all. We're just good friends, I said while cleaning the table. I paused and looked at her. Where did you hear that? I asked, a bit annoyed. Oh, I can't tell you my sources, she replied, a sparkle in her eye. But when there's competition, rumors start flying. Still, I thought. I mean, I could do worse, right? Jeff Klondike is a handsome man. It would be interesting to see if there's more to that nickname of his. If she could make comments, so could I. Handsome? She laughed. Not really, he's just average. I like my guys dark and mysterious with long, beautiful dark hair. Wait, what? Is she flirting with me? Besides, I can't picture either of you as the one who takes charge in that relationship. That was true enough. Then I said something silly. Oh, I'd have to be the one taking charge. There's no way Jeff could ever keep up with me. Then I realized how that sounded, especially to someone I thought might be flirting with me. Her big smile and laugh told me she noticed it too. Oh, now that's a bold claim. Let me grab my camera and we can see. You'll need a wider lens for that, I said quietly. When you mess up, sometimes it's better to just own it. Her eyes lit up and she laughed again. Now you're making claims you can't possibly prove. Besides, can you hammer a nail through a board using just yourself? No? Well, a girl has to have her standards. That was a great line from a movie, and it made me realize she had a good sense of humor and enjoyed cheesy films. I grinned back. A man has to keep some secrets. Our conversation had shifted from questions to playful flirting. You're charming. All right, back to the questions. Can I do a quick side question? What do you mean? I asked. Well, what are your plans for the day? What's next for you? Is it about work with Jeff? I was surprised and needed a moment to think. I had a few tasks lined up for the day. Well, I need to meet with the architects who are designing our stage for the next tour. I have to check in with the office staff about booking Wembley Arena in the UK. I also need to review some designs. And later I have dinner with someone from Netflix to discuss a special they're making in New York. That sounds amazing, she said, excited. Can I join you for those things? I'd love to see you at work and understand what you do, maybe catch you in action. She blushed a little at her last words. I was confused. Why would you want to? It's not that exciting. I can't just sit and watch you write. It's not fun having someone peering over your shoulder, and I know you write a lot of his material. I found some of his shows before you two started dating. A few of his friends have videos of them. I can see that you write a lot of his best material. If you know there are two writers for his work, you could think about what parts belong to him and what parts are yours. Your contributions are the strongest, right? I know you won't answer that, but it's true. Anyway, this is a great chance for me. I can watch you in action, get to know you better, and then write the story more accurately. Yes? Please? I was unsure, but I thought it would be fun to tease her a little. I think you like me, and this is your way of spending time with me, hoping to catch me off guard so you can find out what my secret is. Admit it, you have a plan. She blushed deeply and then responded with sarcasm. "Of course, I can't help myself. You are just so charming. It's really your hair. I can't resist being around you all day." I chuckled at her. "All right, if you want to join me, that's fine. It might not be very exciting, but it's your article." And that's how we spent our first day together. Monica claims it wasn't our first date, but I know it was. Later on, she admitted that some of what I said was true. She did like me and wanted to spend more time with me because I was meeting her expectations and she was curious about me. That evening, we had dinner with a Netflix executive who immediately took a liking to Monica and spent the meal trying to impress her. Monica laughed about it afterwards and said, "Good thing I'm not interested," since the executive was a woman. I have to admit, some thoughts went through my head during that dinner. We conducted our business, and after dinner, she suggested going for a drink at a place she knew near Diversey Avenue, so we went there. This time, I wasn't trying to be invited back to her place. I wanted to learn more about her. I discovered that she had one brother too, but hers was older. Her family came from Florida, and she disliked the muggy weather there, which made me laugh because summers in Chicago could be just as humid. She always wanted to be a journalist since she watched All the President's Men as a child with her dad, who was her hero. He had sadly died in 9/11, being one of the victims in the second tower. She was honest about how much that affected her and her mother. The insurance money helped, and she attended Northwestern like him, but she focused on journalism. Like many students studying journalism, she dreamed of reporting from war zones or writing about deep political issues. Instead, she found herself working on lifestyle articles for Sunday magazines and felt lucky to have that. At least it let her travel, meet interesting people, and explore how their lives compared to hers, helping her figure out what she truly wanted. She was 31 compared to my 33, and called this time her understanding me phase. She was single, having ended her last serious relationship after discovering her partner had reignited a past romance. She moved out right away, found a small apartment, and had been living on her own since. As we walked through the city and crossed Lincoln Park, the evening felt magical. She easily broke down the walls I had built to keep others at a distance without even trying. We simply connected, without any tricks or forced conversations. She was a free spirit, and it was just so nice to be around someone who wasn't trying to fit into anyone else's expectations. She didn't want anything from me, other than a good story. She wasn't impressed by my associate's rising fame and showed little interest in my role in it, which felt really refreshing. When it was time to say goodbye, I hesitated and asked, "So, I don't usually do this, but is there any chance I might see you again?" She turned to me with a raised eyebrow. "Well, that's a first. You trying to chase me? I think I should make you work for it." "What do you want me to do?" I replied, feeling a bit worried she would ask for something I couldn't give. "I want you to take me somewhere quiet for dinner, just the two of us, no recorders. I want to learn about the you that you don't show to others." I was surprised, but ready to agree. "Sure. Friday?" "Pick me up at 7, she said, leaning in and giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "I look forward to seeing what you come up with." Then she walked across the street, hopped into a cab waiting at the curb, and was gone. In that moment, I realized I didn't have her address. To make a long story short, I called the newspaper, left my number for her, and 2 days later, I received a text with an address. Success. I felt over the moon. I had never felt like this before, chasing such an exciting and vibrant woman who seemed to want me to pursue her. That evening, I spent time looking over everything I could find that she had written, trying to find common themes. The key element in her work was how she explored the everyday lives of people. She wrote about the small things they did, making them relatable and human, instead of treating them like distant news items. She brought out their humanity, just like everyone else. It was just as enjoyable to read as she was to be around. We had dinner on Friday, and Jeff was coming back on Sunday. By then, we somehow felt like a couple. It was strange. We never officially said we were exclusive, but we both understood it without saying anything. We were on the same page. We got each other. She was always my last phone call of the day, no matter where we were. She was working for the Sun-Times, writing stories about interesting people. Her career was really taking off. The people she interviewed were becoming more famous, and some of her stories were being picked up by other outlets, which meant more money for her and more opportunities. She had to travel a bit more, but it was never longer than 2 or 3 days, 4 at most. She made sure to stay local as much as possible, and sometimes she managed to travel with me, finding a way to interview someone where we were going. Jeff liked her right away, like an older brother. I had to talk to him and let him know that I cared for this girl and he needed to give us space. The fact that I felt the need to say that made me realize how much she really meant to me. We did many fun activities together. We found the Friends Fountain in Burbank at the Warner Brothers lot and took pictures on the couch in front of it. We took a picture of me on the rail of the Golden Gate Bridge pretending to jump while she playfully pulled me back. We have a picture of her in a Wonder Woman costume with my hands covering her back while she posed seriously. There's even a video of her pretending to have a dramatic moment in Katz Deli in New York, just like in the movie When Harry Met Sally. We traveled a lot, and we became closer with each trip. I even took her to meet my family. They loved her, of course. My dad even jokingly suggested she spend an evening at the Sweat Lodge and made a silly remark about it. It was a bit embarrassing, honestly. She would ask me unusual questions during our drives. Who would you kiss, marry, or be friends with? Hillary Clinton, Melania Trump, and Rachel Maddow? That one made me think. If you could choose how to go, what would it be? I made a joke about it, of course. How many times would you tell a joke before giving up? That made me ponder. It probably depended on how good the joke was, right? She had unique ways of seeing the world that set her apart from everyone else. Whenever something bad happened to someone, she would start to worry about how that person's family would cope. She thought about the people behind the scenes, the ones everyone else might forget. This made her feel humble. She wanted to understand people better, to discover what motivated them and why they behaved as they did. During interviews, she asked questions to help people open up, even if they didn't realize it was what she was trying to do. She was part interviewer and part psychologist. I often suggested she go back to school for a psychology degree since she clearly had a passion for it. She would respond with a sigh and an eye roll, saying she preferred her current job because she liked making money too much. She wasn't perfect, of course. She sometimes didn't reply for days when she was working on assignments or research at home. When she prepared to interview someone, she immersed herself completely. She read biographies, tried to reach out to old teachers and friends, and talk to coworkers. She wanted to gather as much information as possible so she would know what to ask. I jokingly told her she could work as an investigator for background checks if journalism didn't work out. She laughed and said she would probably be better than they were. After finishing a job, she would return and not understand why I was upset. She would say, "You know how I am," oblivious to how her long absences affected me. In her personal life, she was a bit messy. She rarely did laundry. I thought it was sweet that she liked to wear my clothes, not realizing it was because she never washed her own. I only discovered the truth when I asked for some of my things back and got them unwashed. It might sound nice to wear your partner's clothes, but it isn't when they come back smelling bad and with stains. When I stayed at her place, I always insisted on opening the windows because it smelled like dirty clothes. She had her own washer and dryer, yet I often ended up doing her laundry just to make the place bearable. She really didn't like pets. Dogs, cats, guinea pigs, fish, whatever it was. She would turn her nose up at them and back away. She would even cross the street to avoid people walking their pets. It was strange, and I never really figured out why she felt that way. Some childhood experiences, I suppose. Speaking of that, I did meet her mother and her brother. I say this kindly, but they aren't the brightest. She seems too smart to come from that family. She can think for herself and has her own opinions. Her family is definitely what you might call typical Florida people. The kind of folks who make you shake your head in disbelief. You wonder how they managed to stay out of trouble? When they found out what I did for a living, it was non-stop with ideas. "Hey, Benny, I have a great story for you. You should check this out. So, Jimmy Bob and I were out in the truck and we saw this alligator." Monica would look at me with this worried expression, asking me to just let it go, and then she would apologize later in many creative ways. I tried to keep my distance from Florida whenever Jeff had to travel. Also, she didn't want children, at least not right now. That was hard for me to take. I had always pictured starting a family when I met the right person, and now that I had, it was always on my mind. I'll never forget the day that dream began to fade. We were having a picnic in Lincoln Park, watching people stroll by while I fed her grapes. I saw a family with kids playing with their dad and said, "Look at them. What a lovely family scene. I wish I were a photographer." She propped up on her elbows, squinting at the sun, and replied, "Everyone has a camera on their phone, Ben. Just point and click." Then she lay back down, adjusting the cucumber slices she had been using as a spa treatment. I never really got the idea that cucumbers could help with wrinkles. Why cucumbers? What about tomatoes or carrots? Could I use celery to make my tummy smaller? There might be a funny idea there to explore. Then she said, "I don't get why people are so fascinated with families and kids. Honestly, I don't want any." I looked at her, concern washing over me, even though she couldn't see it. "Surely you don't mean that. I thought every woman dreamed of being a mother." She sat up again, noticing the worry in my voice as the cucumbers slipped off once more. "Ben, we need to talk about this," she said seriously, looking right at me. This was clearly important to her. "I don't want kids at all. There, I said it. I don't like them. I don't enjoy being around them. They annoy me, and it feels like a waste of time and money." "But," I tried to say, but I was quickly interrupted. "Everyone acts like kids are the most important thing in the world. I don't agree. I want to do what I enjoy with people I like. I don't want the weight of responsibility that could make me unhappy later." She spoke passionately, her words coming out quickly. I could tell she had been challenged on this by others and was ready to defend her viewpoint. I stared at her, clearly shocked by her reasoning. She looked back, unfazed by my reaction. "What? Everyone is having kids. My decision won't change anything. Since I was born, nearly 1 billion more people have joined this world, mostly from places that don't use birth control. The planet doesn't need more kids from me. If that sounds selfish, so be it." I was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. I really didn't know what to say. "What about me?" I asked, feeling a bit hurt. "Just accept it. If you want to be with me, that's how it is," she said flatly, leaning back, ending the conversation. "Wait a minute," I said more firmly. "You don't want kids, so I can't have a say? Is that it?" I was starting to get frustrated with her attitude. What kind of partnership is that? She sat up again, and I could see concern about us in her eyes, mixed with determination. "Ben, I love you. You know that. But I love you, not future kids. I appreciate what we have and don't want to change it. Kids can bring problems. Maybe I'm not expressing this well." She bit her lip, and I couldn't tell if it was intentional or not. She sat up straight, leaned forward, and took my hand. "Maybe I'm being too strict. I've faced a lot of pressure about this, especially from my mom. I get that good things can come from having kids, but I believe more challenges also come with them. It's like a gamble, and you won't know the outcome for years. If they turn out to be difficult, you just have to deal with it. I don't want that for my life. I want the freedom to travel and interview important people whenever I want, and changing diapers won't allow that. You? Don't make me laugh." She looked deeply into my eyes, her tough stance softening a bit. I sighed. I didn't expect our day to go like this. "You are asking a lot for me to give up, Monica." She sighed and pressed her lips together for a moment. I know I'm asking a lot. It's a big sacrifice, I understand. You need some time to think about it, but this is important to me. We need to talk about this now before we get married. If it's too much for you, then you need to think about what matters more to you. No." She noticed I was about to speak. "No, you do. This is a big deal, and I realize that. Just because it doesn't mean much to me doesn't mean it won't for you. I get that. You need to understand what you're getting into. We don't have to decide everything today." Even though it was clear she already had her mind made up. I nodded. Then I thought of something. "What do you give up?" I asked. "Sorry," she replied, tilting her head slightly. "You are asking me to give up something important. How do you plan to balance that?" "What do you mean?" she asked, a bit cautious. She realized we might be starting to negotiate, which indicated I was considering her request. "I'm not sure. I need to think about what might be worth giving up having kids for." "Well, I can guarantee you one thing," she said confidently. "And what's that?" I asked back. "You'd be the happiest husband without kids ever, in more ways than one, I promise." That was certainly something. We left it at that for the day. Later, we talked again, and I got her to say, "That's how I feel now. I might change my mind. Women can do that." I suspected she was just trying to make me feel better. not that she truly believed it. What did I get in this deal? I had her love. I wasn't sure if it was worth everything, but it looked like it was the only way forward. The truth was, I either had to accept this or we would be done. I wasn't thrilled about it, but being with her made me happier than I thought possible. So I committed myself to making the best of it. You never know what could happen in the future. I never did get to suggest some of my ideas, though. She was not open to sharing. She clearly told me to forget that thought. Oh well, at least I tried. About 2 years later, I made a big change for her. I accepted that I wouldn't have kids and that she was more important to me than anything else. I was tired of using condoms, and she couldn't take the pill much longer. I learned that there are specific guidelines for how long a woman should be on the pill before needing a break. Other options caused issues for her, so to show her I was fully committed, I decided to have a procedure done. It wasn't so bad and got better in a couple of days. There were some funny moments in it, too. I thought it was a big, kind gesture, but Monica didn't want to talk for a couple of months after, so there was that. Anyway, putting those problems aside, we were perfect for each other. We fit together really well. The time we spent together was wonderful. Monica loved to be creative and playful, even in public. She always wanted to have fun and often took the lead. I remember coming home upset because someone at work was being unreasonable. Monica would listen to me moan, and she'd smile as she helped me relax and forget about my bad day. She was great at making me feel good. I know she learned to please me because she wasn't very good at first, but over time she asked me what I liked and practiced so she could get better. For me, it was all about her excitement. Someone who loves making you happy is truly special, and it brings a sense of fun. Monica enjoyed what she was doing and really focused on it. She loved to connect with me and showed how much she cared. That was just part of our relationship. I could tell you more, but you get the idea. Life was good. We had some time apart, which made our reunions even sweeter. We both had our careers, and they were both going well. Jeff got offered a TV show, and I was okay with him taking it. It didn't appeal to me as much. I was busy with my own work. Jeff was always performing stand-up, and he was very dedicated. Honestly, it was nice to have some quiet time. I had been busy with Jeff for over 10 years by the time I married Monica. I was looking forward to some time to relax and do nothing. Monica and I moved in together after about 8 months of getting to know each other. It was really her moving into my place since it was nicer. After another year, I decided to propose. She happily accepted, especially since it was a beautiful ring. There were lots of happy squeals and showing off to friends and family. Jeff was my best man. Who else could it be? We got married in front of the Buckingham Fountain in Grant Park in August, just as the leaves were changing colors. The weather was perfect, neither too hot nor too cold, and it didn't rain, which was great. Our wedding even made the society pages because Monica's best friend was the editor there. We did have a prenup. It was normal to have one, especially since I had more money and my house was mine. Monica was doing well in her job, but it couldn't match my income. We both understood each other, so it wasn't a big deal. Jeff and Maury thought it was necessary to protect our friendship, which made sense. Monica didn't mind signing it, so it was all fine. Then we settled happily into married life for several years. But eventually, things changed. During that time, other events unfolded. Jeff reached the top of his career, and we went on a world tour. Monica joined me for much of it, so we were together. It lasted 18 months, covered 6 countries, included 128 shows, and I even started noticing some gray hair. I guess when my hair changed, everyone noticed because it was long and shiny. The silver stood out quite a bit. After the tour, Jeff took 3 months off, and I worked on new material and did some side gigs for him. He returned to work with another season of his show and even acted in a movie, which he enjoyed. Then we did a Netflix special and went back on the road with more new material for another tour the next year. We called that tour The Simple Man's Guide to Life, and Monica came with me for about 2/3 of it. By the end of it, I needed a break, not sure about Jeff. Jeff then went to Cannes and filmed another movie in Spain. He took some time off before returning to his usual work, while Monica and I decided to do our own world tour. We visited all the places we had seen but never truly explored. It lasted 3 months of travel. It was a good thing we didn't have kids or even a dog. That was never something Monica wanted. I started to see things her way, to be honest. Monica was doing really well, She was interviewing important people now and could almost choose who she wanted to talk to. She had reached a point where there were only so many magazines and newspapers that did interviews, places like Playboy, the New York Times, and the Atlantic. She even got a chance to be a fill-in host on a popular talk show, but after a few tries, she felt that being on TV wasn't really her style. She believed she was better at getting stories from people than being interesting herself. I disagreed, but it was her life, and she seemed happy with it. Then, when he returned to Chicago, Jeff made an incredible announcement. He had met and fallen in love with a woman while in the south of France, and now he was going to marry her. This woman had even followed him to his work in Spain. I couldn't believe it. Jeff was known for enjoying his single life and the freedom that came with being famous. The guy who never seemed interested in settling down was now in love. I would have thought it impossible if I hadn't met her and seen how he acted around her. Her name was Jemima DeLura, and she was from South Bend, Indiana. She had been traveling through Europe with her friend Simone. At just 24, she stood out with her bright blonde hair and was very attractive, with an elegant figure and smooth skin. She had her own modeling career and was financially stable, so it was clear she wasn't after Jeff's money. Was it true love? I'm not sure. It sure looked like it from how Jeff behaved. I had never seen him like this before, like a lovesick puppy, as Monica had once said. He wanted to do everything for Jemima. I couldn't figure out what had changed him. I asked him about it one time after a show while we were having a beer. Although things were different now that I was married and Jemima was around, there was no chasing women happening anymore, and neither of us seemed bothered by it. So, what happened in France, Jeff? You seem like a different person now. And don't give me that "I just fell in love" line. I know you better than that, I said, sipping my beer. He looked at me for a moment, thinking about my question, and then took a sip of his beer. Honestly, I don't know, Ben. I was on top of the world with everything I wanted at my fingertips. You know how it is. He looked away, then stared at the mirror behind the bar, peeling the label off his bottle. And then she walked into the hotel lobby. She wasn't even a guest there. I can't explain it. Maybe I was just tired of my old life. Maybe I was finally ready for something new. I really don't know. All I know is that when I saw her, with her bright smile and beautiful hair wearing cut-off jeans, I thought, yes, that's it. She's what I want. She's what I need. So I walked over, said hello, and we had a drink at the bar. He chuckled a little. But Jeff wasn't trying to brag about that moment. He wasn't acting like he was better than anyone else. It was just the truth. He couldn't go anywhere in the Western world without someone recognizing him. Both of us had worked very hard to achieve our success. When you become known, people get familiar with you. That's just how it is. It doesn't mean he doesn't appreciate what comes with success. Jeff has never turned down a request for an autograph or photo when I was around. He looked at me again. I know you don't approve of some parts of my life, Ben. I can see your expression when you think about my dating life now that you're married. You've grown up and I haven't. I understand that. I was surprised he felt that way. I didn't think I showed it so clearly. But I guess I did. I was about to say something to apologize for any misunderstanding when he raised his hand. No, it's okay. I get it. I've known you for a long time. I understand what you're thinking, and you probably get what I feel too. But here's the thing. I'm having a hard time figuring out my thoughts right now. I don't know why. I didn't wake up one day thinking, I want something different. I was happy. Then she walked in and suddenly I felt drawn to her. She has something special. I can't quite explain it, just that she has it. Maybe I was ready for this. Maybe I need it right now. I don't really know, but it feels important. I want it too, obviously. Have you seen how great she looks? She's stunning. He went back to opening his drink. Tonight it seemed like he needed to share his feelings, so I just sat and listened. She makes me happy, you know. Not only because of what she brings to my life, but also because of what I can do for her. I spoke up. I've never heard you say something like that, Jeff. That's a big deal. Putting someone else's needs above your own sounds like a great connection as long as she feels the same way. I think she does, but then again, I could be wrong. You know how it is. Sometimes we see things the way we want to. He wasn't quite understanding that saying, but it fit what he wanted to express for now. Are you happy, Jeff? Really happy? He turned towards me. I would marry her in a second if she wanted to. I've told her many times. She wants to take her time and get to know each other better. I'm fine with that. She's mentioned that we will eventually get married, but it might take some time to get there. She believes that this time together will help us understand each other more deeply. I'm all in, no matter what it takes. After that, the bar was mostly quiet, or as quiet as it can be in a lively place. I gave a thoughtful smile, showing I appreciated my friend's words. I looked her in the eye and said, "If you're happy, I'm happy. Just make sure you have a good agreement in place, all right?" From that point on, we spent a lot of time together as a group. She and Monica really clicked right away. It was a special connection. Jem praised Monica for her style, and Monica returned the compliment about Jem's hair, and just like that, they became good friends. The two of them would go out shopping together. I found it interesting because Jem's style was quite different from Monica's, yet they could easily spend an entire day at the mall, filling the car with shopping bags. They also enjoyed ladies' nights at either our place or Jeff's. Sometimes it was just the two of them, and sometimes with other friends. We all went to the movies together when we could, and the women would try to broaden our perspectives. They thought attending performances about serious issues could help us see things differently, but I found it hard to understand how watching certain types of shows would change our views. Jeff felt the same way. To be fair, they also came with us to some basketball and hockey games. Jeff had great tickets to the hockey games, right behind the penalty boxes, and we used those tickets often. We were all happy as couples, enjoying time together as a group, while the girls did their own activities and Jeff and I focused on work. Everything was going well. Then, something shifted. I can even remember the day it happened. We went out as a group to eat at a fun restaurant. Sometimes Jeff liked to go to places where he could entertain others, and he enjoyed reminding everyone of his talent. It was part of who he was, and we didn't mind because he always put on a good show. But that night felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Although Jeff was being his usual lively self, the atmosphere felt heavy, and it was hard to start a conversation. Clearly something was off, but I had no idea what it could be. While Jeff made jokes and interacted with those around us, the rest of us were just quiet. On the way home, I asked Monica, "What was up back there? Did something happen?" She avoided my question and didn't want to tell me. By the time we got home, I was starting to feel frustrated. She was hiding something from me, and I needed to find out what it was. When we walked into my house, I was really frustrated. "Monica, what is going on? He's my partner, and I deserve to know. Just tell me." I raised my voice, maybe too much. She said I yelled, but I didn't think it was that bad. She avoided my gaze and fidgeted, so I finally shouted, "Fine, I'll just sleep in the guest room. Forget this, and forget you." I admit I was overreacting. Anger can make us say and do things we don't mean. Monica looked upset. "No," she said quietly. "Okay, I'll tell you, but not everything. I promised, Ben. You have to understand that." "No, Monica, I don't. Whatever promises you made to someone else can't be more important than the promises you made to me when we were married. Remember that? Those come first." "It's not. You don't understand. It's not my secret to share, Ben, please. I found out something about Jemima, something she wouldn't want anyone to know, not you, not me, not Jeff, no one." "Is she cheating on him?" I yelled, feeling furious. I was jumping to conclusions, but I couldn't think of anything else. "No!" Monica yelled back, surprised. "It's not that. Just something about her that she hasn't made public, and that's all I can say. It's not about being with another man behind Jeff's back. It's something personal." "Can she not have kids? Did she hurt someone? What is it, Monica?" I pressed on. "Look, Ben, if you had a secret that you didn't want people to know, wouldn't you want someone to promise not to share it? I'm trying to respect that. Please. If you found out, it would hurt our friendship with them. It's not because you'd know, but because I would have broken my promise. Can't you see that? It doesn't affect you or Jeff. Please trust me. I would tell you if it did, but it doesn't. All this would do is ruin a friendship. So, if you care about me, trust me and let it go." When she put it that way, I did trust her. What else could I do? I was angry with her for keeping secrets, especially because it led to evenings like this, one last try to get through to her. "What about the promise you made to me? The one in front of our families?" I asked. "This is different," she replied sharply. "If it impacted us, I would tell you. I really would. But it's not my place to share, so please don't push me. No one wins in that situation." I paused, feeling lost. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was. I don't know what it is, but if it leads to nights like this, then it will hurt our friendship anyway, I suggested gently. You're right, she sighed. I can't deny that. But that's mostly on me. I reacted poorly to what I found out. I need some time alone with Jem to clear the air. We'll find our balance again and everything will be all right. Just wait and see. Only Monica could use a word like all right and make it sound natural. It's true she is a journalist. So I let it go. I had to decide if I would trust her and believe it didn't change things between us. Was it worth living in a place filled with doubts? I could push for answers, but that could only lead to hard feelings. Maybe it was something serious I needed to address? I'd never know until I asked, and once I did, who knew how I would feel about it? So I decided to let it go. Monica was right, at least for the moment. She sorted things out with Jemima, and when we were all together next, things felt much more relaxed. Life went on as usual. If anything, the two of them became even closer. They went on more outings together, like shopping trips and a few weekends away. Sometimes I'd come home to find Jemima in our kitchen, chatting with Monica about different things, laughing and enjoying coffee together. Monica would always greet me with a smile and a kiss and then gently suggest I go watch TV or spend some time in my home office. I pushed the situation from my mind and placed it in the things I'd like to know category, hoping I might find out in time. Meanwhile, I had my own life to live. Looking back now, it's funny that I never thought of including this in my act for Jeff. I often took bits of my life at home, added a funny twist, and worked them into my routine. Monica always knew where some of the jokes came from. Since it was Jeff speaking on stage, no one would connect it back to us, so while she wasn't thrilled about it, she took it in stride. Sometimes, she laughed the hardest, knowing the story behind the joke. But with this situation, I didn't create any comedy around it. Things were good and felt normal for about 6 months. Then things got a bit unusual. Not strange, just a little different. Monica became more affectionate. She liked to hold my hand and wrap her arms around me, resting her head on my shoulder. She wanted to share food with me when we went out, and her level of affection increased. After we were close, she would cling to me and smile, giving me soft kisses until she fell asleep in my arms. It was nice, but a bit surprising at the same time. After 3 or 4 weeks of this, I decided to ask her about it. I wasn't suspicious. I was just curious. I didn't want to make it a big deal, but it was definitely a change. I was curious, though I didn't want it to end. It was classic confirmation bias. One morning we were having breakfast. She wore her robe and I had on shorts and a shirt. I said, "So, hey, I really appreciate all the affection lately, but what's going on? Is there a reason for this kindness?" I asked, taking a bite of my well-buttered toast. I can't stand toast with just a little butter. It has to be done right. Butter it well when it's hot from the toaster so it melts into the bread. Perfectly buttered toast is a delight. Everything else just doesn't compare. I tried to say it playfully, hoping not to sound too serious. The last thing I wanted was to upset her. She paused, her cup of coffee near her lips. "Can't a married woman just love her husband without it being a big deal?" she said, not annoyed, but with a tone that suggested she could get upset if pushed. I raised an eyebrow and chewed my toast slowly, enjoying the quiet. She looked at me closely, then sipped her coffee and set the cup down, holding it with both hands. "Okay? Yes, there is a reason," she said seriously. "Not long ago, I remembered that I had asked you to give something up before we got married. You did it for me, and I wanted to make sure you know how grateful I am for that. This is my way of showing you how much I appreciate it." That was sweet of her. I smiled back. "I won't say you're welcome because it was tough, but I'm glad I did it. My time with you is the best part of my life. Just us against everything." Then she suddenly started to cry, and I was taken aback. She just sat there, tears falling, and I thought, what did I do? While she held on to me. "What's wrong?" I whispered, brushing my hand through her hair. "Are you okay?" She trembled and cried harder, burying her face in my shoulder. After a while, she calmed down a bit and looked up at me. "I don't deserve you," she said softly. I smiled gently and offered my hand. "Of course you do. Now let's go back to bed and I'll show you how much." And we spent the morning enjoying each other's company. This went on for another 3 or 4 months, and I began to notice I was seeing less and less of Jemima. We would go out together, but she often didn't come or would send an excuse. While Monica still saw her, Jemima stopped visiting when I was around. It felt strange. I tried to talk to Jeff about Monica, asking if she was upset with us or if something was wrong with her. After our meeting, he looked serious and said, "Ben, I appreciate your concern, but I am sure there's nothing happening. She's just busy with her new swimwear line. That's why she hasn't been around. Don't worry, she's not with someone else." Then he patted my back and went on with his day. When I mentioned it to Monica, she waved me off and said, "Everything's fine. She's just wrapped up in her work. I'll see her soon and will tell her you're worried, but it's all good." Looking back now, I see how foolish I was. I didn't notice the signs right in front of me. I thought maybe I had upset her or that she was having problems with Jeff. I had no clue what was really happening, even though there were hints. I just believed everyone and accepted what they said while Monica became really sad for about 2 weeks. She was off, like she was having a tough time. I kept asking her what was wrong, and she'd hold me tight, put her head on my chest, and say, "It's just something silly with Jemima. It will all work out." Then one day she seemed better and said she and Jemima were going to a nice spa weekend near New York. She promised that everything would be okay when she got back and that we'd finally take a vacation together. I was so naive. She left on Wednesday and was supposed to return on Sunday. It was only when I got a call from the spa on Friday that things started to make sense. Monica had left her wallet there, and they called to let her know. They got her voicemail and were calling me as her emergency contact to inform me. Emergency contact? I wondered why a spa would need that. The name, Family Clinic of Staten Island, did not sound like any spa I knew. They wouldn't give me any information over the phone. They said they couldn't share such details. A quick search online gave me the answers I needed. It was a family planning clinic that provided certain medical services. No wonder her phone was off. She couldn't let me see where she was since we shared locations. Now I only had one question. Who was it for? Was it for Jemima or for Monica? I thought it was probably about Jemima based on how things had been lately. She hadn't been around much and it all added up. Monica had never been fond of children, so it was hard to believe this was about her. On Saturday morning, I got a call from Jemima's phone. "Hello, Jem? Hi, Ben. It's Monica. My phone isn't working. The battery died and I can't charge it. I'm going to take it to the Apple store nearby and see if they can fix it. Sorry, I just noticed." Great. So Jemima's phone was fine, but Monica's was not. This meant Jemima didn't mind who saw her, but Monica did. Things were not looking good. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep calm. I was trying to figure out what to say and what to ask. Should I tell her what I knew? Would she be honest with me? Why was I even wondering if she would be honest? What kind of thought was that about my wife? Thoughts raced through my mind. I was trying to decide what to do next. I'm not the kind of person who hides my feelings. I have read stories about people who get news they don't believe and pretend until they figure things out. That's not me. I wear my emotions on my sleeve. It's part of how I live. To be true to myself, I have to express my feelings. Some might say I should have stayed calm, but I am who I am. "Are you okay, Ben?" she asked after a moment. "You seem quiet." "Monica, the family planning clinic called about your wallet. Your phone was off. Was this about you or Jemima?" There was a sharp intake of breath followed by silence, and then she said softly, "I'm so sorry, Ben," before hanging up. While it wasn't certain, I was almost sure this was Monica. It matched what I had seen from her. She had been clingy, then distant for a while, probably when she found out something, and then off to New York to deal with it. I convinced myself it couldn't have been my fault. I held on to that belief because I had undergone a procedure that should have prevented it. Still, I knew that sometimes things could change. But if it wasn't mine, then whose was it? I tried calling back, but Monica's phone remained off. She was either still pretending about her battery or didn't want to talk to me. Probably both. Jemima's phone went straight to voicemail and she wasn't answering at all, so I did what anyone would do. I called Jeff and asked to meet him right away. I needed to see him before Jemima did. I needed to find out if Jeff knew something, and if he did, whether he knew who the father was. Jemima wasn't worried about Jeff knowing her location, so it made sense that he had information. I was familiar with Jeff, I knew his tells, and I believed he wouldn't be able to lie to me if I asked him directly. We met at a local coffee shop. For Jeff, it was a familiar spot, so he managed to blend in, even if he looked a bit out of sorts. He arrived wearing a hat and dark sunglasses, not the polished look you would expect from a successful comedian. As soon as I sat down, I could tell that either Jemima or Monica had spoken to him. He set his coffee on the table, took off his hat and glasses, and leaned back, raising both hands. And just like that, the feelings of betrayal began again. "Ben, before you react, please understand this was never supposed to happen." He started, but I just stared at him, trying to grasp what he was saying. "What the heck?" I said, a bit louder than I intended. He glanced around and leaned in closer. "Keep your voice down. We don't want everyone to hear," he urged me. "You what?" I pressed, my gaze steady on him. His expression showed that he was evaluating the moment. He wasn't trying to make things worse. He seemed to feel sorry for me, but he was also figuring out whether we needed to move somewhere else. "I knew this was a bad idea before Monica," he managed to say, before I slammed my hands on the table, not caring what anyone thought. "It's your baby?" I exclaimed, leaning in closer, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. He raised his hands again. "This isn't the right time or place, Ben," he said, looking around nervously. "Well, I'm sorry," I shouted back. "The right time was probably when you first got involved with my wife." "It's not like that, Ben. Please, this wasn't planned. You don't understand." I shook my head in disbelief and then threw my hot coffee at him. I didn't care about his reasons or excuses. Why should I listen to him? He was the last person I wanted to hear from. If I had calmed down, I might have figured out what he was trying to say, but I was too angry. I felt betrayed not only by Jemima, but by my best friend and business partner, too. If I had thought clearly, I might have realized that some pieces of the puzzle didn't fit together. If it was Jeff's child, why would Jemima be with Monica for the abortion? It didn't add up. As the day went on, the betrayal was not over, and I would learn more soon enough. I stormed out of the coffee shop, barely stopping myself from confronting Jeff physically. I was proud that I had held back. That kind of situation in a public place involving someone well-liked would not have been good for me. I would have faced consequences that would keep me away for a while, and I needed those days to start over in my life. When you're feeling angry, hurt, confused, jealous, and betrayed, you don't always make the best choices. I certainly didn't. I went home and began packing her things, not caring much how I was doing it, into boxes and bags. She had already taken some of our luggage on her trip, so it didn't take long. I put all her items in boxes and stacked them in the garage. Her car was at the airport, and since there wasn't anyone nearby to help, I considered taking everything to Jeff's place. But he lived in a fancy apartment with a doorman, so getting in would have been difficult. Plus, I didn't want to see him because my feelings were still raw. It was best to leave everything in the garage for the time being. Since our locks worked with codes and fingerprints, it was simple for me to change them and remove her access. I also updated the passwords on our network to prevent her from connecting automatically if she came back, just to be safe. Then, I took care of the usual tasks. I created a new account, moved some money around, and changed all the passwords for our shared investment account. The agreement we had outlined what she would receive, and I made sure to leave enough in the account for her to start anew. Most of the investments were still in my name anyway, and I would deal with that later when it came to legal matters. I also knew I had to find a lawyer. Rather than asking the one we used for business, I decided to look for someone new, as I didn't want to trust anyone at that moment. I found a random lawyer based on recommendations online and set up an appointment for the next day. In my anger, I wanted to finalize the divorce quickly. I wanted her to feel the sadness I felt, the pain that I believed she deserved. After everything was done, once I'd let out all my anger, I just sat back. I pushed away from the laptop and took a moment to think about everything, and it wasn't easy. When something like this occurs, you begin to question everything. Not just thoughts like, was I not enough? Or what did I do wrong? Or why doesn't she care about me? But also, every past moment of affection is looked at differently. All the times I interacted with Jeff were examined again in a new light. I had a lot of facts, but I realized I didn't know everything. It was clear that there was more going on than I understood. I knew I needed to talk to Jemima. She clearly knew something was happening, which is why she hadn't been around for the past few months. I had convinced myself that this was part of whatever was going on with Jeff. Jemima had found out and was keeping her distance because she didn't want to tell me. Was that why? But then why was she with Monica in New York? She was there and Monica used her phone, so she had to be. I didn't know the most important answer of all, which was why. The only way I would find out was if someone told me. But right now, I didn't want to talk to anyone. I couldn't trust anyone, so I wouldn't believe what they said anyway. The phone rang several times. Jeff. Monica, her phone was working again. I checked her location and yes, it was where it should be. There were a couple of calls from Jemima's phone too, even one from Maury. I could guess what he wanted. I was also thinking about what to do next. There was no way I would work with Jeff again, that was clear. Should I end our partnership, go on talk shows and ruin him? What should I do? I decided I needed more legal advice about the business first before deciding my next steps. But I knew I would take action. Jeff wouldn't get through this without some consequences. It's funny how the people closest to you often face the strongest backlash when they betray you. The divorce lawyer I was meeting with had already told me he only did family law. I would need someone else for the business side of things. He might help with that. Then I sat down, had a few glasses of whiskey, and went to bed. Monica wouldn't be back for 2 more days, though I suspected she might want to return early. But would she be allowed to? Would there be enough time for her to recover? I decided I didn't want to think about it. She would return when she could, and no matter what, I would be gone. I planned to leave for the reservation after my meeting with the family law lawyer the next day. I needed to be around people who weren't trying to hurt me. I thought it would be nice to just take some time to heal. I finally fell asleep late and woke up early, ignoring the buzzing phone. My meeting with the divorce lawyer went pretty much as I expected. I brought him the prenup, explained everything I knew, and he agreed to prepare the paperwork for the separation. He mentioned that I would need to know the complete story, so I would have to talk to her at some point. I figured that was normal, right? Get the full story, find closure, and move on. He also said I would need to talk to Jeff, and at that point, he said he would have to refer me to someone else. He recommended a firm called Pearsons and Associates. The main person in charge there seemed to be someone lawyers respected and feared. They had all the services I needed. I said I would talk to Monica and consider getting some help soon to deal with my feelings. But at that moment, I felt nothing. I had gone from angry to sad, and now I was just numb. I felt like a cork floating in water, moved around without any control. Packing up her things and seeing a divorce lawyer felt like pulling that cork out. Now that it was done, I was lost, unsure of what to do next. I hadn't really thought through what happened. I was just responding to things happening around me. Every interaction started to feel uncertain. I began questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I wondered not just, why did this happen to me, but also, why did something like this seem to happen to me? These are 2 very different questions with different meanings. So, I went home, packed a bag, bought an expensive last-minute ticket, and left my phone on the kitchen table after printing my boarding pass and calling my parents to tell them I was coming. I took an old phone we used before, just to order a ride, and then left. When I arrived, it felt good to be in a place where I felt welcome. Spending time with my parents, my brother, his wife, and their kids was just what I needed. It took time to explain everything that happened and share my feelings, or lack of feeling, about it all beyond the initial anger. But that sharing among family passed down through generations is special. Being open with the people you love holds great power. The Native American way values understanding the person speaking, what matters to them, and respecting who they truly are. There's no need to hide. The real you deserves respect, and honesty comes naturally. In Native American life, there are still issues to deal with, but it's different from the politics found elsewhere. Western society often forces people to hide who they are. People are so focused on how others see them that they often don't show their true selves. You have to guess what people want because they won't say it for fear of being exploited. The Native American view is about figuring out if you can help and understanding what you might gain in return. You shouldn't push others to do things they don't want to do. That's not right. That's why my people live on a small reservation, far from the land we once freely roamed. The Native American way values honesty and respect from the start. When disagreements arise, they are about real issues, making it easier to find solutions. It's hard to explain, but that is the essence of it. It seems there is a lack of honesty and self-awareness in much of modern society. I could share my feelings openly. I talked about how I felt and what I thought. When questions were asked, I could respond honestly. It felt liberating to reveal my true feelings to people who care about me. Even in moments of disagreement, I knew their intentions were kind. They genuinely wanted to help me move forward. During these deep conversations with my family, tough questions came up. For instance, my brother asked, "Was her having an abortion the worst choice she could have made?" That question made me think. If she had announced she was pregnant with someone else, wouldn't I have suggested an abortion anyway? She made the choice without consulting me, which definitely affected how I felt about it. It wasn't so much about judging her decision, but rather the fact that I was left out of the decision-making. It was uncomfortable to be in that situation, but I couldn't know her reasons, only my feelings about it. Another question was, would you want to know? Looking back, I would definitely want to know if my business partner was involved with my wife. Living in ignorance isn't easy. While I felt somewhat content not knowing, I sensed something was wrong. You can't treat your spouse in a way that leads to complications like this without losing some degree of respect for them. If one partner loses respect for the other, it raises questions about the relationship itself. Does it really matter how that happens? We discussed my feelings a lot. We wondered how she might have been feeling, why she could have strayed, and what I wanted for the future. I was told to take my time before making any decisions. I shouldn't rush, and should think about what I wanted and needed. I also needed to gather more information. I wondered why she acted the way she did and how she felt. Maybe she was ready to leave and be with Jeff. I had no idea how Jemima would feel about that. You would think she'd be upset. But she was with Monica in New York during the divorce process. Was she there to make sure things went smoothly in their marriage? Or was she there to support Monica emotionally? It was puzzling. After all, her husband was the cause of this situation, so wouldn't she be angry? It was clear I needed to talk to her too. I accepted that our marriage was over. No matter the reason, the disrespect she showed me was something I couldn't overlook. She knew how much I had given up to be with her. I felt like she took that gift and threw it away, and we both were aware of it. The house belonged to me because it was clearly stated in the prenup. It was mine before we got married, it was paid off, and it was completely mine. I wouldn't be surprised if she tried to move out while I was away. Either way, I needed to have a serious conversation to get some closure and move on. I still loved the woman I thought was my wife, but the person I saw now didn't feel like her. She looked like her and acted like her, but she wasn't the same at a deeper level. I wondered if she ever had been that way, or if I had just not seen things clearly because of my own desires. I wasn't filled with anger, even though I was definitely upset. It was a strong upset, like a don't make me upset sort of thing, but not to the point where I wanted to break things. I felt very sad and had many questions about both myself and her. I wondered if I wasn't enough for her. What did she need that I couldn't give her? What had I done wrong? Why was what I offered not enough for her? I had a lot of feelings, but they seemed to be manageable for the situation. One evening, we talked about this a lot. My sister-in-law thought the true impact of what happened hadn't hit me yet, and maybe she was right. My brother, who can be difficult, joked that I wasn't emotionally mature, so it was unlikely I felt emotions like other people. I should mention he had been drinking, so he wasn't trying to be mean. He was just aiming for humor. I explained, a bit sharply, that if we wanted something funny, I could provide it since that was my job. But right then, I had nothing funny to share. My parents were more considerate. Dad thought I might be pushing my feelings aside, while Mom believed I was the most mature one among us, handling my feelings instead of letting them take control. They didn't realize that I felt mostly numb, just getting by with the basic emotions. When I told them this, they nodded, but Mom looked worried. She was concerned I might not be with family when the heavy feelings finally hit me. That was a worry, but I needed to return to Chicago to figure out my future. I needed more details. I needed to wrap up certain parts of my life and start new ones. I thought spending those days with my family would help me face whatever awaited me at home. But as it turns out, things don't often go as planned. While it was nice being with people who just wanted to support me, it didn't really help clarify what I should do next, besides moving on from Monica. The news I received was not what I had imagined it would be. I spent 5 days there before my old phone buzzed. Someone in Chicago realized it was lost and that I was probably using it. I looked at the screen, unsure if I should answer. It likely wouldn't be Jemima or Monica since they didn't have the number, so it was probably Jeff or Maury. I wondered if Jeff had given the number to Monica. Would he do that? Then I thought I could just check the screen to see who was calling. That would answer my questions. I looked. Maury. Well, on a whim, I decided to answer. Ben? Maury's voice came through. Who else would it be? I replied, a bit irritated by the question. Right, sorry, of course, said our agent's clipped voice. Look, I don't know what's going on, but Jeff is frantic, searching for you everywhere. Monica calls me every few hours asking if you've been in touch. Where are you? I'm at the reservation, I said honestly. At this point, they would find out where I was anyway. I'd be leaving soon. I'll be back in a few days. We can meet and talk about what's next, or maybe what isn't. There was a sigh, followed by silence. Eventually, he said quietly, I had a feeling this was too good to be real. Can you tell me what's happened? All I know is that Jeff mentioned something happened. You're very upset, and that Monica is searching for you. Did you have a fight or something? I thought about it and decided there was no reason to hide what happened from Maury. He would find out anyway when I started to end the partnership. Jeff got Monica pregnant, and she went to New York to end the pregnancy. I didn't know anything about it, I said plainly. There was a pause, then Maury said quietly, Wow. Look, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, Maury. It won't be good. You can be sure that our work together is finished now. He won't get away with this, believe me. Ben, Maury replied slowly and carefully. Please don't act in anger. Don't ruin everything you've built over the years because of this. You need to think about it. I expected Maury to respond this way. His own interests were clear. Without me, Jeff would have no new projects besides the TV show, which only had one more season planned. Maury took 20% of what we earned, and that was a lot. If one of his acts failed, it wouldn't look good for his other clients. He would always push to keep us together. Still, he was a decent guy, and his advice made sense, even if it served his interests too. I decided I would check into the legal side of the partnership after I dealt with the situation regarding Monica. While I wanted Jeff to face consequences, it was better to do it carefully than to react rashly and make things worse. I wanted the results of my actions to be clear and intentional. I felt so numb that this plan even sounded okay to me. Listen, Maury, I honestly don't know what I'm going to do next. I'll divorce Monica, of course, but regarding the partnership, I'll probably end it or something similar. I can promise I won't be working with him anymore. Can you blame me? I'm not going to harm anyone, though. I won't go public unless he pushes me. If he does, then sure, he can deal with the fallout. But that's up to him. Got it? There was another sigh on the line, a bit more relaxed this time. I'm really sorry this has happened to you, Ben. You didn't deserve it. I'll keep this as quiet as I can. That's my job. You, do what you need to do. Will you come by when you're back? We can try to figure this mess out, he asked. Sure, I'll find some time. It might be a few days, though. I need legal advice about the business first. I'm sure you understand. Yeah. There was a pause that felt uncomfortable. Should I tell Jeff that I talked to you? He asked casually. Well, he is your client. I guess you have to do it, right? You're my client, too. I'm stuck in the middle. There was a pause. Then he sighed. What a mess. And it's all because he can't control himself. Who knows what Jem is thinking? I shrugged, but realized he couldn't see me. I stayed quiet because one part was still uncertain. Honestly, I was quite curious as well. The family and I had looked at many ways to understand her actions, but we never really figured out the truth. I'll talk to you later, Maury, I said, adding, please, if Monica asks, I don't have this phone, okay, or Jeff and Jemima either. Sure, he replied. Take care, Ben. I know it's tough, but life goes on. I'll see you when I see you. Then he hung up. After the call, I spent the day in the back garden, sipping tea and bourbon, but never mixing them. Only someone who didn't care would do that. I have my pride. I wondered why I wasn't more upset. I felt numb, emotionally. I loved Monica deeply, so why wasn't I more heartbroken? I didn't feel much at all. I wasn't angry, sad, or confused. I was just sitting and trying to think about my future. I should have been losing my temper. I should have been drowning in a bottle or asking everyone I knew why. I should have been furious, but I wasn't. I was thinking, yes. I was pondering many questions and trying to figure everything out. I had moments of anger, but overall, I felt disconnected from my emotions. It started to make me question myself. My family thought I was too calm. My brother even pointed out that if I truly loved her, I wouldn't be so composed. I was simply looking at how she would move, how to return her belongings, what my next steps would be, how to deal with Jeff professionally, and what the divorce would look like. Yes, Jeff would face consequences, but I felt detached about that too. I was preparing tasks, one after another. Then my mom provided some clear insight. She said, "The floodgates have opened, but something is blocking the flow. Once that gets loose, everything will come rushing out. It has to. The feelings can't stay bottled up, and when it does, Ben, you'll need us." My mom was wise for someone from a regular suburban background. I'd expect this kind of talk from Dad, but Dad had clearly influenced her. Even though I didn't feel it, I knew I was like a pressure cooker ready to blow. I wondered what might set me off. But in the empty mood I was in, I didn't think about it for long. With that thought, I returned to Chicago to pick up my life, trying to figure out what to do next, both at work and in my personal life. When I got home, I was relieved to find it quiet and free from any interruptions. No one knocked on the door for 3 days while I kept busy. I went grocery shopping and dropped by my family lawyer to see what they had been preparing. They had different papers ready, but they suggested I talk to Monica before filing anything, just to understand my own feelings better. I couldn't help but chuckle at that. Would she really be honest with me? Maybe, who knows? Recent events made me rethink what I believed about her. I had my meeting at Pearson's. Jessica Pearson herself came by to introduce herself and check on me. That woman has a strong presence. If anyone thought I had it together, I was just a mess compared to her. I brought along the contract that Jeff and I signed years ago, along with other agreements like the one for the Netflix specials. They said they would review them, and then we could discuss my options. We set up another meeting for 2 days later, and I left feeling unsure about my next steps. So I went home and sat quietly, staring at the wall. On the third day, as expected, Monica showed up. She brought Jemima with her, which I should have anticipated, but it was still unexpected. The doorbell rang, and my phone notified me that someone was at the door. Through the video, I could see Monica and Jemima. She hadn't even tried to enter with her key or fingerprint. I would have received another notification if she had, since I had removed her access. This made me ask myself another question. She understood me well. She knew how I would feel about her actions. Deep down, she must have known it would mean the end for us. After being so close for weeks, why did she go through with it? This added yet another question to my list. Maybe I would get some answers. I stood up slowly, taking deep breaths to stay calm. If I was going to lose my cool, it was likely to happen in just a few moments. When I finally got some answers, I went to the door feeling very tired. I opened it to see Monica, who looked just as worn out as I felt. She stared at me, sadness clear on her face. She knew we were finished, and now it was just a matter of time before the shouting began. Jemima stood behind her, looking sad too. Her face showed a mix of hope and worry. It was the look someone has when they have to do something difficult, something that won't be enjoyable and might hurt someone. Monica seemed drained and defeated, just like me. Her sadness felt heavy in the air. She didn't say anything, only looked at me with a question in her eyes. I didn't reply. Instead, I left the door open and walked away into the living room. They followed, with Jemima gently closing the door behind her. I sank into the main chair, facing the big window that overlooked the street. Monica sat on the small couch nearby, close to me. Jemima sat on the armrest of the couch, positioned near Monica for support, but not too close, keeping it clear that it was Monica and me against the situation. I stared at her, waiting for her to say something. She returned my gaze, looking uneasy and fidgeting with her hands. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Ben. I can't express how sorry I am." Was it mine? I cut in, getting straight to the point. I didn't want her empty words. They felt meaningless right then. She sighed and glanced at Jemima before looking back at me. "No," she said slowly. "It wasn't yours. If it had been, I wouldn't have." done what I did." "I see," I replied, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "So it's Jeff's then. He kind of admitted it." She nodded, and tears began flowing down her cheeks. She didn't even try to wipe them away. "We did a prenatal test after I found out I was pregnant. Given what you gave me, it was unlikely to be yours, but I wanted to be sure. If it had been yours, I wouldn't have acted the way I did. But once I knew it wasn't yours, it had to be his. There was no other option." I nodded. At least now she knew the child wasn't mine. She hadn't terminated the pregnancy without knowing. It also meant that Jeff was the only one involved. But I still didn't understand why it happened. I thought we had a good relationship and that she wouldn't have turned to Jeff. Clearly I was wrong. I glanced at Jemima, who looked worried as she watched us, her eyes shifting between Monica and me with concern. "And you? What's your part in all this?" I asked her. "I expected you to be very upset about my wife." I emphasized the last two words. "And your husband? Having a baby with him?" She just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without making a sound. She looked at Monica with fear in her eyes, then turned back to me, appearing to withdraw into herself. Suddenly, a realization hit me. "You knew?" I shouted. "You knew she was seeing your husband? You were okay with her having an affair?" This explained why she had been absent for so long. She knew Monica and Jeff were involved, and for some reason she wasn't stopping them. Maybe she was handling her own issues. She was, but it wasn't what I thought. "No, Ben, I wasn't with Jeff," said Monica gently, pulling my attention back to her. She emphasized the name Jeff in a peculiar way. Then it all began to make sense. She glanced at Jemima and smiled at her, a shy, nervous smile, and reached out her hand. Jemima shifted over to sit beside Monica and took her hand, not in a supportive way, but something deeper. I watched as my gaze moved from Monica to Jemima, who still looked scared but a bit calmer now that she was next to Monica. "I'm so sorry, Ben. It just happened. It had nothing to do with you. It just clicked. And then I found out that Jemima liked women very much." "That was what all that 'I found a secret I can't share' was about?" I cut in, not caring about being rude. This wasn't the time for niceties. Monica nodded, tears still slowly forming in her eyes. "Yes," she confirmed. "Well," I replied, "it doesn't seem like much of a problem now, does it?" It was a low blow, but I felt justified in my anger. She brushed it off. "Ben, I wish you could understand. This wasn't planned. There was no intention. It just happened. She connects with me in a way you can't, and you connect with me in a way she can't. It's like balancing forces." "Let me guess," I growled. "You weren't taking anything from me, right? She gave you something I can't, right? You were fulfilled in a way you never realized you needed?" I knew the typical stories cheaters tell. Monica surprised me. "No, I took something from you. You no longer have a faithful wife. What I found came at your cost. I knew that, Ben. I'm not completely foolish." "Foolish enough to have a baby with Jeff, though." The words came out before I could think, but honestly, they were true. "No," she said softly. "Jeff was a mistake. He found out about us one evening. He came home early and was very upset. You can imagine that." Oh, I could imagine all right. I could guess what would happen next. Now I understood the whole story. He was really upset, and the only way we could think to keep him quiet was to let him be a part of it sometimes. The pregnancy, it just happened. It wasn't planned. I don't know if the protection failed or what. It just happened, Ben. I'm really sorry. When I found out, we had to figure something out quickly. There was no way I could carry that man's baby, not for a second longer than necessary. I noticed the "we" in what she said, but no matter what happened next, it was clear that Jeff was in trouble. "If it had been your baby, I would have carried it without hesitation. But it was his, and the timing made it clear. I'm sorry." She lowered her head. "Anyone else's?" I yelled. "How many other men were there?" Honestly, I didn't believe there was anyone else. Still, I couldn't believe she had done what she did, so it felt like a valid question. She looked back at me, surprised. "There was no one else, Ben. Just Jeff. Sorry for the wording." She was still holding Jemima's hand, and Jemima had her other arm around her shoulders, holding her close while still looking at me. "I could still do this, you know," Monica said quietly, a hint of hope in her voice. "What do you mean?" I asked, taken aback. I know you want kids. I know you gave that up for me. I could make that happen. To make up for it. We could raise them together. All three of us. Monica's expression changed as she looked at me, hope now shining in her eyes. It seemed she thought she had found a solution. I had a procedure, Monica. You know that, I replied sharply. Well, I hear it's reversible. People do it all the time, she said, almost pleading. We could work this out. Together. We? I said, looking over at Jemima and then back at Monica. Oh, Ben, please don't push her away. She's the only support I have right now. She's been there for me through all of this. How can you say that, Monica? I replied, frustrated. She's part of the problem. This mess is because of her, you, and Jeff. I know, Ben. I understand that you didn't deserve this, but it's happened. I love her, I love you, and I was with Jeff, and while it was okay, it was nothing like what we have. We made a mistake, leading to this pregnancy. We made a decision about it. She stumbled over her words, but continued. And now we're being honest with you. I hope you can be kinder than I have been. But I wasn't feeling kind at all. I was trying to keep my emotions in check, but anger, bitterness, and sadness were rising up, ready to take over. All the feelings I had been holding back came rushing forward. My mom could no longer hide her troubles. Where are you staying now? I asked, not even trying to answer her plea for help. Not with Jeff, I hope? No, she said right away. I can't stand to be around him anymore. He forced us into a bad situation, and now he's just worried about the fallout. He can't control us anymore. You know the truth now, and what he had over me. It's gone. I scoffed. Forced? You chose to do that trying to keep me from finding out the truth. You just made everything worse. I was scared, Ben. Can't you see that? And why were you scared, Mom? I asked, softer this time. I wanted to hear her side. Let's be honest. Well, I didn't want you to find out. Like this. I wanted to explain things myself. I wanted to tell you that you are still the most important person in my life. The only one for me. Even she didn't seem to believe her own words. I wasn't convinced. Her excuses didn't make sense. I shook my head. Sure. And when were you planning to do that? In my opinion, you knew how hurtful this situation was, but it was exciting for you, and you didn't want to stop. You knew it was wrong, but tried to hide it from me so I wouldn't be upset. I think you even tried to distract Jeff with other offers so he wouldn't tell me, all so you could keep having your fun without me finding out. That's what I think. No, she gasped, looking for help from Jemima, who had been quiet so far. It wasn't like that, she said. Jems and I spent hours trying to figure out how to tell you. We knew we had to eventually. We couldn't keep this from you. You didn't deserve it. You're too important to me. We discussed many ways to break the news without this happening. Oh, really? I asked with doubt. Like what? What? Monica asked, confused. You said you had ideas. What were some of those? Monica looked at Jemima, who nodded at her supportively. Well, one idea was to put on a fun show for you and Jeff. Get you both a little relaxed, and then we would flirt and end up entertaining each other, which would help you feel more at ease with us being around. Eventually, we might have some experiences together, including with Jeff, and then it would lead to just the two of us hanging out sometimes. You would see it wasn't a threat to you. So you'd gradually reveal your unfaithfulness, relying on the fact that men are easily distracted to do your work? I said sarcastically, wishing for a drink. No, well, yes, a bit, she admitted. But you never actually did that, did you? We both knew that they had come up with at least one idea, but it hadn't happened, so what did it matter? Honestly, I wasn't sure how you would feel about me being with Jem and Jeff, or him being with you, so we decided. Better to keep both of us in the dark until you were ready to share your news, right? But not enough to stop. It was safer to be with Jeff instead of me, since I might cause trouble. Neither of them responded to that, and I understood why. There was nothing to say from where I was sitting. You just kept doing your thing until Jeff found out and then put your plan into action, but without Ben involved, I said flatly. I really needed that drink. They both shrank away, avoiding my gaze. And then you got pregnant, and I had no idea. I spoke plainly. I was so angry that I felt cold and controlled. There was a heavy silence for a few moments, then I asked, You never answered my question. Where are you staying? Jem has an apartment downtown that she bought when she and Jeff first got together as an investment, answered Monica, sounding a bit tired. We are staying there. I looked at Jemima and directed my next question to her. You've been quiet. How did you think Jeff would take your news if you got to tell him first? She shifted uncomfortably and glanced at Monica. Don't look at her. Answer for yourself, I said, tired of just Monica talking. She shifted again and finally said, I think Jeff is. Easier than you. Less complicated. Less. She searched for the right word and settled on strict when it comes to relationships. You think he would have been okay with this? I asked, genuinely confused. I believe that if I explained it right and assured him I'd still be there for him, he would have been open to it, yes, she replied. I just looked at her. She seemed to be out of touch with reality, just like Monica. I once heard a political commentator say that when you make a decision that affects a person's ability to earn money, it will always be criticized by that person, no matter how right the decision is. I realized that this idea applied to relationships as well. It didn't matter how silly their argument was. If a relationship was in danger, any reason to defend it felt valid to those involved. He was there for me during the times we were together, Jemima insisted, raising her voice. Monica looked surprised by her tone. Well, he was. Jemima shot back at Monica, upset. It was working. It was only working because he had the upper hand, I said calmly. It was temporary, and he knew it. I think you're mistaken, Jemima. Jeff changed when you came into the picture. The things he said about you make me think it wasn't really working, more like you wanted to believe it was. I think he kept you around while enjoying his fun with two attractive girls who wanted to keep him happy. What guy wouldn't like that? And then Monica getting pregnant just messed everything up, didn't it? What I really wanted to say was that they were both aware of his shortcomings and were enjoying themselves at the same time. I tried to stay composed. I wanted to hurt them, but I needed to understand their thoughts and words to truly grasp the situation. While words can be powerful, I knew this wasn't the right time to unleash my feelings. I was already plotting how to bring pain to everyone involved. If my mom could see into my mind at that moment, she would have been disappointed, shaking her head. All her teachings would seem wasted. But that didn't matter to me. Jemima looked at me with a sad expression, and Monica felt the need to explain. You have to understand, Ben, it was an accident, an unexpected situation. I took care of it as soon as I found out. There was never going to be a little Jeff running around, you can be sure of that. You could have used protection to avoid any of this, I replied, feeling resigned. Monica sighed. Yes, we did. But we were. Desperate. I didn't think it through properly. Desperate to keep your secret from me, I responded, keeping my tone steady. I wasn't ready to give them sympathy or understanding. They didn't deserve that. You didn't think about how this would turn out for me, but you definitely thought about how it would affect yourself, or you wouldn't have been making Jeff so happy, right? Monica sighed again. We weren't trying to hurt you, Ben. We just needed some time. Time to figure out how to tell you this without making you really upset. I know we weren't fair to you. I know you have strong beliefs about loyalty. I understood mine before all this. I knew it would be hard for you to accept. It wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened, did it? I said, using air quotes again. Things like this don't just happen, Monica. There are signs, moments that lead up to those choices, flirting and all that. It's something you actively choose to do. For once, Monica sat up straight and spoke clearly. No, it wasn't like that. I know you won't believe me, but there was no long build-up of flirting leading to this. I wasn't aware that I was crossing any lines. If that were the case, I would have noticed and stopped. You know I feel the same way about trust and loyalty as you do. Do you really believe I would say one thing to you and then go down that road, knowing it could ruin my marriage? There was a thoughtful silence before I replied. I wouldn't have imagined you would have an affair with a woman, end up with my business partner, and then find yourself in a situation like this, so I'm unsure of what to believe right now. Monica sighed with frustration. Yes, I get that. Before all this, would you have ever thought something like this could happen with me? No, we both know that's true. The truth is, it happened quickly. It wasn't curiosity or because I was looking for something that you couldn't give me. I was happy and secure. And then... She glanced at Jemima, who reached out and touched her arm, giving her a supportive smile. It happened one day after we were shopping. We bought some fun things for both you guys, some dresses and some lovely outfits. You know, now that I found out Jemima is bisexual, I was surprised when she mentioned how she missed the gentle touch of a woman while we were talking about our partners. I thought, what? And then she told me she had relationships with women before. Apparently it's quite common in modeling circles, but I didn't suddenly want to try that just because she enjoyed it. I wasn't thinking, oh, I have to experience that or anything like that. You saw how I reacted when I learned this, even if you didn't know what it meant. I was not happy, quite the opposite. She paused and looked at me. Could I get a bottle of water or something? I'm really thirsty. I could help with that, so I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of water for both her and Jemima from the fridge. I finally had the drink I needed. I came back and sat down, handing bottles to both women. Monica opened hers and drank eagerly. Jemima just sat there, fiddling with hers nervously. Thank you. I wasn't suddenly excited to explore a different side just because Jemima said she liked kissing girls. You have to believe me, I didn't have those thoughts. It really wasn't like that. She looked at me anxiously, as if my assurance would change things. For her, it seemed to matter. I just stared back at her, and she continued after a moment. We were just trying on clothes, drinking wine, and chatting. You know, being silly. We joked about what our partners would think if they saw us trying things on. Then Jemima said, I don't know what Ben will think, but I know what I think. There was a pause, and I asked her what she meant. She said she found it incredibly exciting, and then she kissed me. Maybe I had a bit too much to drink, or I was caught up in the moment, and she got shy and looked at Jemima for support. I kissed her back. Then suddenly clothes were all over and things happened fast. Well, you can imagine. I understood. I know it's often seen as a fantasy, but hearing my wife talk about something like this, especially when it led to her expecting someone else's child, was really heartbreaking. My discomfort must have shown on my face because she leaned forward, worried, and tried to take my hand, letting go of Jemima for a second. I leaned back quickly and pulled my hands away. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Ben. I want you to understand, this isn't the end for us. She glanced at Jemima, who nodded and smiled at me. I didn't smile back. The thing is, after it was over, it was like I saw everything clearly for the first time. It was amazing. I felt a connection with Jemima that I only felt with you before. It was soft and intense in a different way. Don't get me wrong, what we have is special, but this was something unique. It didn't replace what we share, it added to it. When we are together, I can appreciate what you bring even more. And when Jemima and I are close, I respect her for who she is. She actually turned red. I couldn't believe it. She really believed that blushing was okay. When she tries to use the strap-on, it doesn't even come close to what we share. I wasn't sure who she was trying to comfort, but it was clear it wasn't working. I kept quiet, feeling so upset that I was surprised I wasn't yelling. The point I'm trying to make is that I didn't plan for this. It just happened. It wasn't a slow build where I knew it was wrong and did it anyway. The moment it occurred, I couldn't undo it. It changed my life completely and ours too. Now I had to figure out how to move forward and include you in this change. She looked at me intently, her expression a mix of sympathy and seriousness that made her seem tense. Even then, I thought to myself, that's a good line. I have to remember it. I know this is unexpected, she said, getting straight to the point. I'm truly sorry for what we did with Jeff. We were just trying to handle things, as I mentioned. It was never meant to be something lasting. It was just a way to buy us time to bring you into this without causing trouble. I was shocked. The misunderstanding was so deep, I didn't even know where to start, but I was ready to try. So, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms to control my frustration, you thought the best way to keep me calm about you being with Jemima was to have threesomes with Jeff. You thought that would make me happy? That everything would be fine? When I found out, and you know I would, you thought I'd be okay with that? I aimed for disbelief, and it was easy to hit that mark. Well, when you say it like that, it does sound pretty foolish, Monica shot back. Pretty foolish? I repeated, staring at her in shock. More like very foolish, clearly. But like I said, we weren't thinking straight. I was scared that if he told you before we could include you, you'd, well, react poorly. So we had to act fast. The thing is, Monica, I believe you really thought that was a good temporary fix. Because everything else you've told me is so far from sensible, this fits right in. Monica sat back, her lips tightly pressed together. The truth is, you haven't actually apologized for anything. Being with Jemima, treating me as less important, threesomes with Jeff, getting pregnant, going through with the procedure, none of it. I don't think you feel bad about it. It seems like you're just sorry you got found out. All of this feels like you're spinning your story. You haven't come around for days, not because you want to give me space, but because you were trying to find a way to make me accept this. She looked deep in thought, and I leaned closer. Well, here's the truth. I'm not going to accept it. You knew that from the start. You knew it right after you were with Jemima, and everything you've done since then has been to hide it from me because you knew I wouldn't agree. It's not like that, she said softly. I've been trying to show you that you are my number one person. I didn't believe her. No, you haven't. Have I not been clear? You even mentioned how caring I was. That was real. It wasn't a way to make yourself feel better. It was genuine affection, showing you how much you mean to me. I can't imagine being without you. You have to see that. I wanted to know if things were still the same between us, and they are. My new experiences didn't change how I feel about you. If anything, I've realized even more how wonderful you are. I let out a short laugh, filled with disbelief. You really don't understand, Monica, I said sharply. Everything you say shows your true feelings. Saying number one guy means there should be only one. I shouldn't just be a top person for you. There shouldn't be others. But now your mind is on someone else. You've made it clear that your love for me has changed somehow. It can't be anything but guilt-driven when you suddenly act differently after doing something you knew was wrong. I leaned back with my arms crossed, watching her. She looked annoyed. No, that's not it, she replied, glancing at Jemima. It's more like, you are my soulmate. Then I was with Gems, and I realized I can have a special connection with another woman too. You are still my male soulmate. It feels like I can have different kinds of soulmates. My love for you hasn't changed, or maybe it has, it's grown. Being with Gems has made me see you in a new light. My actions show how much I value you, how deeply I love you. That hasn't changed. She emphasized those last words, hoping I would understand. How? I asked simply. How what? She replied. How did you find new ways to appreciate me? What did you realize about me that you didn't notice before? She seemed caught off guard. I was pointing out one of those phrases that people say that don't really mean anything because they never explain what they mean. It's something comedy writers often do, like using the phrase, thoughts and prayers. What thoughts exactly? What prayers? Can anyone share one? No? Well, the fact that you let me be free, that you trusted me for who I am, was... She suddenly realized she was taking a wrong turn with this conversation. Yeah, that worked out really well for me, didn't it? I trusted you, and look what you did. It was hard to hide my bitterness, and for once, I didn't try. Yeah, bad example, she said, looking down and shifting in her seat. But the fact that you did it is the point I'm making. Not that I'm not wrong for taking advantage of it. So you decided to reward me for trusting you by doing something I should have already been getting as part of our marriage? I asked, steady, looking right at her. The disbelief showed in my voice. Look, I already said this was a bad example. She replied, moving again. And how did I get rewarded? I continued. What did you do that you hadn't done before? Well, I tried to give you more attention. Be there for you. Tried to be loving. Touch you. Remind you I was yours. More affection. More focus on you. Even though you weren't there for me, I cut in. I wasn't going to give her an easy way out. I was yours, she responded, a little angry. And I was there. Except when you were with her, I pointed out, nodding at Jemima. Because you spent a lot of time with her. You couldn't help it. Not since you decided you had a special connection. She glanced at Jemima, looked down and sighed. And so, you rewarded me by doing things you should have been doing already, right? If you are a good partner, you should already be doing everything you mentioned, right? The affection, the attention. You're just doing what you should have been doing from the start. This makes me think you weren't doing those things before. So, you really only improved what you should have done as a caring partner. Monica seemed to think about this, then said, as if she just got an idea, well, Even if that's true, me being with Jemima just made me a better partner for you. I scoffed. So, for you to be what you see as a good partner, you need to be with another woman? Monica growled in frustration. You always do this. You take something good and make it negative. I care about Jemima, I care about you, I care about both of you. I need both of you. You are both important to me, and it just feels right. I just don't understand how this could be wrong. She was clearly frustrated that I didn't see her point. You don't get it, Monica. You were with someone you shouldn't have, because you were married to me. That doesn't make it okay, and honestly, I don't care what excuses you have. You knew what you were doing was wrong, and instead of being honest with me, you just kept hiding it. Now it has all come out. Offering me kids now? Do you really think I want children with someone I can't trust? I'm actually relieved we never had kids. Even if we had, you haven't changed your mind. You're only bringing it up now because you got caught. What kind of life would they have? They'd never be loved the way they deserve. I paused to collect my thoughts. Monica looked away, her chin down as my words hit home. And how do we even know you can have kids anymore? We never discussed it since you didn't want them. And let's say I forgive you. What happens next? Are you going to keep seeing Jemima? Am I supposed to be okay with sharing you like that? We were hoping to find a solution. Jeff had his arrangements, so it seemed fair. I couldn't believe what I heard. Fair? Jeff got you in trouble, and now Jemima is still involved. Jeff will get what he wants, but I won't have her in my home. I told her to leave before I lost my temper. Everything I felt came rushing out. My anger, my hurt, it all poured out like a flood. I knew I was right to feel this way, and so did they. Jemima stood up quickly, worried. I stayed put, already upset. I'm sorry, Ben. I never meant... She stuttered as Monica helped her out, looking back at me anxiously. Just go away, I muttered, tired and not looking up. Monica returned after a brief talk in the hallway and sat down again. That was too much, Ben, she began, and I felt my anger rise again. That person has ruined our marriage. I can't believe I only yelled at her, I shouted. Monica took a breath, leaning closer. She hasn't ruined anything, Ben. This is about your pride and your ego. I understand how you feel, I really do. I did something really bad and wrong, something I shouldn't have. Then I made it even worse, I know that. But now we have to figure out how to move forward. I looked at her. How to move forward? There's only one way. She sighed again. I knew you'd think that. I realized after my first moment with Jemima that this is where we would end up. That's why I tried so hard to keep this from you. I really don't want us to end. I want to be your wife, your partner, the most important person for you, like you are for me. I would do anything to keep that. Why can't you see that? Suddenly, my anger faded. Monica saw things through her own wishes. She thought she needed something different, but that wasn't my view. I see that, Monica, I do. You wanted it all. You keep talking about soulmates, but you are missing the point. A soulmate is one person, not many. That's why it's called a soulmate, I said, tired. I took another sip of my drink. And what about Jemima? Where does she fit in? What if I need you and she needs you at the same time? Who do you choose? I would go to whoever needed me the most at that moment, Monica replied. And that's the problem. You think it's simple. I shouldn't have to compete for your attention. We had a promise a few years ago that said otherwise. You might find it harder than you think. I'm not on board with this. I'm just trying to help you understand that what you want can't work. You've already broken the trust we had, and that won't come back, no matter how much you explain. I took another sip while she thought about this. You were with another woman? You fell for her? You crossed lines that we agreed not to. You made choices that hurt us both. You were trying to keep everything together, but some things are already lost. She sighed. I knew this is where we would end up. I just did. You keep saying that, I interrupted, frustrated. If you knew this would happen, then why did you do it? My voice raised with irritation. Monica paused and looked at me thoughtfully before replying, calmer than I felt. I knew it was wrong after it happened. It wasn't planned. It just occurred. But once it did, well, I understood how you would react, and I was right. She paused again, then started to speak quickly, her words spilling out. All I'm trying to do is grow, Ben. I wish you could see that. It's not about leaving you behind. We could just be partners on a new journey. I scoffed and muttered, Yeah, looks like you have a partner for that journey already. Don't blame me for the mess. Monica, I wasn't the one who suddenly found someone new. I'm not running around with anyone else or causing trouble. Don't put this on me just because I reacted badly to it. Monica looked at me with sadness, but continued anyway. It's a path I didn't even know existed for me. I'm not sure if I'm a lesbian or bisexual, to be honest. I just love Jemima. It's not like I suddenly feel attracted to women. I admire their beauty, but I don't think about them the way I think about Jemima. I don't look at other women and wonder what it would be like to be with them. The same goes for other men. I have you. I haven't considered anyone else since we got married. Monica, you are taking something away from me. Your growth comes at the cost of what we have. Being with someone is a balance, whether you want to believe it or not. If you're spending time with Jemima and giving her your affection, then you can't be giving it to me as well. Don't tell me about loving more than one person or sharing love like it's easy. That's not how it works. You have a limited time each day, and the moment you focus on someone else, I'm losing your attention. It doesn't matter if you're busy or not. There'll come a time when we are both available, and someone will lose out. I sighed, feeling weary from trying to explain. Some people just don't want to listen. As you said, I didn't agree to this. I don't care what new feelings you have or what ideas you've come up with. We promised to be exclusive, and you've decided that's no longer true. What I think doesn't matter because you've made this choice for both of us. I won't accept that. And you knew I wouldn't, which is why you did what you did. You made it all so much more complicated. Well done, Monica. You didn't just ruin our marriage, you completely destroyed it. I was exhausted. We had repeated the same arguments over and over. At this point, I wanted her to leave so I could heal and think about what to do next. Just go. It's over between us. You know it is. I won't share you with anyone. You've already caused too much hurt, so go and build a life with Jemima. Ben, Monica said, her voice full of concern. Just leave, Monica. Please go. I'll have my lawyer contact you. I'm finished. I have nothing left to give. You've not only wrecked our marriage and dreams, but you've also hurt my career. Good job. Now just leave. I shouted the last two words. I was completely drained and angry. I just needed her out of my sight so I could have some time alone. Monica slowly stood up, trembling. She looked down at me, sad, or at least I imagined so. I couldn't bring myself to look up. Ben, no matter what happens, I will always love you. You will always be my man, and I will always be here for you, no matter what you need. If you ever need anything at all, I'm here. I will never forgive myself for what I've done. I knew we might end up here, but I hoped it wouldn't happen. I wanted to find a way for you to understand, but I see now that was just wishful thinking. I fought hard to hide it from you, but I only made things worse. I'm so sorry. You'll never know how deeply sorry I am. I could hear the tears in her voice, but I still didn't look up. I just pointed toward the door. One last thing, because I know you well. You might think this is because of you, that you did something to lead us here, that you weren't enough. You need to know that's not true. You were always enough. This is all on me. You are everything a person could want, Ben. Don't ever think you weren't, or that this is somehow your fault. There was nothing you could have done to stop this. I let it happen because I tried to have it all, and now I have to face the consequences without the man I love. I just wish you didn't have to suffer, too. It's not fair, and I'm so sorry for hurting you and breaking what we had. I will never forgive myself. She paused, then added again, I am sorry, Ben. I love you. I wish you could understand how much. I didn't have the energy to respond or to say that she would be moving on with Jemima while I would be left alone. What was the point? I didn't want her back, so there were no choices left. When she said, you'll never know how much, I had proof that she was wrong. It wasn't as significant as she believed, or she would never have made those choices in the first place. Then she turned and walked away. I heard the front door open and shut, and something within me felt lost. The day continued. It grew dark, and I sat alone, softly crying. I knew something important was gone, never to return. Life, as a friend once said, goes on. And it did for me, though in a different way. I felt broken, and I realized it, but I couldn't do much to fix it. My attitude changed. I became irritable. If someone made a mistake while helping me, I would let them know, even the barista at the coffee shop. The cheerful part of me disappeared overnight. It didn't take long for news of our problems to spread. Not the details, just that we were separating, that Jeff was involved, and she was now living with Jemima. Information about her new relationship with Jemima trickled out over the weeks. I had no intention of sharing the details of our situation, it was private. But the fact that I had no public contact with Jeff, that he hadn't released new music, and that some of his performances were canceled, people started to connect the dots, even if it was a bit off. After the meeting with Monica and Jemima, I didn't leave my house for days. I reached out to Pearsons and Associates, and they suggested I come in to discuss what to do next. I also called my lawyer to discuss the prenup, following the rules closely. I wasn't going to leave Monica without anything, but she certainly wouldn't take half of everything. My house remained mine, and she would receive about 20% of what I had made during our time together. That was significant enough. She wouldn't need to work again unless she wanted a comfortable life. She was someone who valued hard work and wouldn't want to rely on others. She didn't fight the divorce. There were no attempts at counseling. She understood that for me, it was over. I imagined she found comfort in Jemima. I didn't want to know for sure. I cut off all contact with her and Jeff. I blocked and deleted her number, Instagram, email, everything. I did the same with Jeff. After 6 months, I was finally free. I didn't have many friends left, so there was no celebration when I got the final paperwork. Most of our shared friends sided with her, and the few who didn't, I pushed away. One of them mentioned, while we were out for drinks, that our group had started calling me Bitter Ben. When I heard that, I totally believed it. It felt strange. I knew I was being unfair to people. I was taking my anger and sadness out on them, but I couldn't seem to control myself. I snapped easily at others, and while I could see what I was doing, stopping was another story. Afterwards, I felt bad, but in the moment, it was as if I had no choice. I was filled with anger. It was always there, just below the surface. I felt frustrated. I had no one to talk to about it, so it just built up inside me. The one thing I didn't do was blame myself. Oddly, the last thing Monica said, that it wasn't my fault, and I couldn't have stopped any of it, stuck with me. I didn't feel guilty. All I had done was love her and trust her. But that feeling didn't help. I was still suffering. It gnawed at me. I felt deeply betrayed by Monica. She had an affair, fell in love, and didn't tell me. Then, after months of giving me mixed signals, she became pregnant with my business partner. I knew I wasn't to blame, but the fact that she could hurt me like this was hard to accept. I was angry with her, but still, I had loved her, and in some way, I still did. Someone asked me what I would do if she came back and said she had left her new partner and wanted to make things right. I thought I had my answer: we were getting divorced. But I couldn't shake the question. How had I misjudged her? I had given her everything I could, but it hadn't been enough. She had betrayed me, and I felt like I didn't even know who she really was anymore. Jeff tried to reach out to me a lot. He even came to my house a couple of times, but I just sat there and didn't answer, watching on my app. Still, his visits made me call Maury. He sounded both relieved and anxious when I finally got in touch. Maury? Oh, Ben, thank goodness you called. I've been so worried about you. How are you holding up? By this point, everyone knew I was divorcing Monica and that Jeff was somehow involved. People were making their own guesses. Yeah, I'm managing. Look, I need you to tell Jeff something for me, okay? I spoke sharply because I was fed up with everything and everyone. What should I say, Ben? Maury asked, sounding a bit hopeful. Tell him if he comes to my house again, I'll let everyone know about his mistakes. He needs to leave me alone. There was a pause after that. Did you get that, Maury? Let him know he's lucky I haven't confronted him, and if he shows up again, I might just do that. I heard Maury taking a breath before he replied carefully. Ben, it seems this has really affected you, and I get that. I'll make sure to pass on your message, but we also need to talk about what happens next. Not today or tomorrow, but soon. I need to understand your situation better so we can figure out the way forward. It's pretty rough at the moment, Maury. You might want to stay alert because things aren't improving, I told him. He was correct. We would need to talk, but I wanted to get some legal advice first. Ben, please don't take any big steps. Let's work together to find a solution to what's happening. Both you and Jeff have dedicated too many years to your work to throw it all away now. Please, can we talk? Maury urged. It was hard to tell what was driven by his concern as a friend versus a professional. I'll come see you soon, Maury, I promise, I replied. I just need to sort a few things out. I need some time to think. All right, Ben, I understand. I'll send your message to Jeff. Please take care of yourself, he said before hanging up. Threatening Jeff with the possibility of going public would work. He'd have to back off. He couldn't risk it. For public figures, their image is everything, especially for comedians. Just look at what happened to Louis C.K. or John Mulaney after their public troubles. If people learned about this incident involving Jeff, that would ruin his career, and he was very focused on his career. So you might ask, if I wanted Jeff to face consequences, and I definitely did, why not just tell everyone? The reason was I didn't have solid proof. It would just be my word against his, and while I was sure some would believe me, many wouldn't. If he decided to pursue legal action against me, I wouldn't have a way to defend myself. No, I had a better plan thanks to Jessica Pearson and her team. I had given our contract to her law firm along with other agreements from the company, and they had been reviewing them to help me understand my options and next steps. I was really angry at the company and wanted to take action against Jeff. I thought about suing him, but I had been warned to wait. They said they needed time to understand the company's legal situation before giving me advice. It was interesting because Monica was the one who had wronged me, along with Jemima, but my anger was mostly aimed at Jeff. While I felt a lot of anger towards Monica, I wasn't ready to confront her yet. A week later, I received a call from a law firm called Pearson's and went to their offices. I sat in their fancy conference room, drinking expensive coffee, facing 3 serious lawyers who looked ready to pounce. I almost joked that we needed a bigger room, but I figured they'd heard that many times before. The first lawyer, whose eyes seemed to shine red at times, said, "Mr. Blackcloud, we've reviewed the contracts and finances you sent us. We now have a good understanding of the situation your company is in, as well as yours and your partner's legal and financial standing. We see that you are understandably upset with Mr. Klondike. The question is, what do you want to do? How much do you want him to suffer?" I looked at them, waiting for a reaction. I was unsure if I would get one. Finally, I said, "I just want him to pay for what he did. I want him to know that I won't let him get away with it." The leading lawyer smiled, revealing all his teeth. It was a little unsettling. "In that case, our advice is simple. If you want to see him really hurt, do nothing." "What?" I asked, startled. "Yes, do nothing. Just make sure you follow through with what you already have in place. Besides that, take no further actions." He leaned back, looking satisfied. I glared at him, wishing he would understand my frustration. However, being a lawyer, he probably dealt with difficult situations all the time. "Let me explain," he said, clearly pleased with himself. "Your contract with Mr. Klondike is straightforward. It was created a while ago and wasn't drafted by someone who knew much about entertainment law, but it works. It's set up as a client/contractor agreement, with you as the contractor and Mr. Klondike as the client. However, it also aims to offer some fairness. You both share ownership of the earnings from the company, and importantly, you both own any content created through this partnership. Although he takes home a larger share of the payments, all the other assets are shared equally. The payment section is separate from who owns the assets. Anything you create, he owns part of, and anything he creates, you own part of. This includes the TV show, and we notice you never claimed your share of the earnings." I nodded and shared what I had been thinking. The main advisor smiled broadly. "Our first suggestion is to pursue that 40%. You have the right to do this since there is no written agreement saying you waived it. We believe it could be worth several million today. He must pay you, or he will face a long legal battle that he is likely to lose." I nodded again. That was a solid plan. I should have thought of that earlier. But to really get his attention, let him know that you will keep this contract. The business will run as usual, but you will stop contributing to the ideas the business owns. I started to understand his point, and I couldn't help but smile. Maybe this was catching on. "So, you're suggesting?" "We're suggesting that if Mr. Klondike wants to keep working and selling products, you should receive 40% of the income. Whether you help with it in the future or not, he will essentially pay you for doing nothing. For any new work he creates, you get 40% of what he makes. That is how this contract is set up. There is nothing that requires you to keep working or that states you won't own anything new created. I liked that idea. Getting paid without any extra work sounded great to me. But isn't he just going to try to shut down the company, end our shared ownership? The advisor replied, yes, Mr. Klondike might try that. However, there are important reasons why he probably won't. First, what happens to the ideas that already exist? There's nothing in the contract about that. The courts would likely divide everything equally, which could be messy. Maybe you would get half the funny parts and he would get the other half. It could be confusing figuring out who owns what. Sharing ownership of a performance would also be complicated. They would likely split the income evenly, which is actually worse than your current deal of 40/60ths. With musical groups, contracts usually include details for such situations. Here, those details were missing, maybe because the lawyer at the time didn't have enough experience. The only things specified are ownership of what exists and what is created. Then there's the issue of sharing ownership of the material itself. If you or he decided to cancel the usage rights, what happens to all the DVDs already being sold? Can you sell that ownership? Or let someone else use the rights, the jokes, in your case? What are those rights actually worth? This is the kind of thing that estate lawyers try to figure out, but it usually takes a long time and a lot of arguing. The lawyers make money, but no one else does. He smiled in a strange way, and I couldn't help but think his teeth looked longer, almost a little frightening. King Hyena then turned to one of the others and held out his hand. A document was dropped into it, and he slid it across the table to me. But this is the biggest reason he shouldn't try to change the contract. This is the Netflix special contract you both signed. In fact, you signed 2 of them in a Sky TV special. They're all quite similar. They give exclusive rights to the show he performed for each company for 15 years, covering both the performance and the material. If you end this agreement, it voids the Netflix contract too, since the rights to Netflix would no longer exist. And unlike your agreement with each other, they can impose several penalties if this happens. They could demand all the money they already paid you back, plus an additional 50%. There would also be losses from not having the Netflix special available anymore, which only they can decide. Basically, it gives them the power to financially harm you and Mr. Klondike greatly, without any way for you to appeal. I flipped through the pages of the document, barely paying attention to the words while he explained everything. The key point is that Mr. Klondike would find it very unwise to try to end this agreement between you, while you only need to sit back and receive 40% of everything he earns from now on. This may not be a lot in terms of future earnings from new performances, since you created much of the material he used. But for any material he does use, you own 50% of that, meaning you will earn from it. And of course, you get the 40% on all merchandise and any future earnings from what already exists. He leaned back, looking very pleased with himself. I was glad the windows had shades. He seemed ready to burst with joy from the sunlight outside. As I said, your best choice is to do nothing and let him pay you for it. Can't he start a new company and do something with that? Yes, I understand that idea was mentioned before. He can do that as long as you sign an agreement that specifies the rights for any new material he might create. The current contract covers everything and takes priority over any new agreements. To change anything, you'd have to agree to give up certain rights in a change to this contract. Are you likely to sign something like that, Mr. Black Cloud? I don't think so, I said, forcing a grin. It seemed we were both playing a game. I thought so. No, I believe you have a good side. A new idea struck me. What if I create new work and sell it to other people? That's a great question, Mr. Black Cloud. We did think of this. The contract doesn't say you must give all your work to Mr. Klondike. It only applies to what he actually uses. If you make something new and keep it from him, then it doesn't count in this contract. That's even better, I said happily. So, I can write for others, and he can't claim it? Exactly. Unless he can show that you wrote it for him and intended for him to use it, you're safe. In the end, the advice cost me over $65,000, but it was worth it. It gave me a sense of resolution. However, the real change didn't start until I realized I needed help. I was being difficult to everyone around me, and I recognized it. I knew I couldn't keep acting this way, as it wouldn't end well. I couldn't go back to the reservation with all this anger inside. The advice to be your true self doesn't really work when my true self seems to be an angry person, right? So, like many others in America, I decided to see a therapist, as Miss Crenshaw liked to be called. I asked for recommendations, checked reviews, and did the usual searches. I found her group, made an appointment, and sat down with her. It was an interesting experience. She used something called cognitive behavioral therapy, which she explained as a way to help my mind view things differently. We worked on making lists of my thoughts, which was challenging because my problems were tied to my feelings. If I could link my thoughts to my feelings easily, then I wouldn't need help in the first place. But we kept going. I made lists, and she suggested keeping a journal to track my thoughts and to tell my story. She thought that reading it as a story might help me remember what I was feeling at the time, and we could discuss those thoughts together. So we did that too. It was helpful. I managed to focus my anger on a feeling of betrayal. While I could aim my frustration at a couple of people, Monica, Jeff, and Jemima, I realized I couldn't really get back at them. It left me feeling stuck. I was upset about being let down and felt powerless to show them how much it hurt me. Monica got to ride off into the sunset with her close friend while I was left alone. It took some time for Miss Crenshaw to help me see that this was my own choice. My pride and self-respect played a big role in all of this. Part of what frustrated me was that in my deepest thoughts, I could understand where Monica was coming from, especially regarding her feelings for Jemima. I didn't see it coming because Monica didn't either. There was no teasing or hints ahead of time, at least that's what I believed. It felt like a sudden event that changed everything in our marriage. When Miss Crenshaw challenged me with a similar situation, I understood why Monica hadn't talked to me about it. She clung to our relationship during that time to reassure herself that, even with this new part of her life, the old one wasn't gone. It was wrong of her to try to have both, and it was a poor decision. But I could see why she felt the need to explore without letting go of what she knew. Understanding didn't lessen the pain of feeling betrayed. Not telling me about her feelings for Jemima was unforgivable. There was no doubt about that, and all the issues surrounding Jeff felt like the final blow that made any chance of forgiveness impossible. The problem was that I had no outlet for my anger. The core of the betrayal came from random chance. Monica didn't know she had these feelings, and discovering them wasn't anyone's fault. Yes, she shouldn't have made the first move with Jemima, but she had no idea that it would create such a mess in our lives. Because I could understand her actions, my anger felt unfocused. It was just a sense of betrayal. And even though I still loved her despite what she did, that didn't make it any easier. I knew I could never be with her again or trust her, but you can't just turn off love. I tried, but I saw that she was hurting too. Part of me felt sad about that. While Monica found her close friend, she lost her bond with me. That wasn't her original intention. It became an unavoidable outcome rather than a choice she wanted to make. Miss Crenshaw thought this was why I was short with everyone. I was upset with life itself for the betrayal. I couldn't reach Monica to confront her, and even if I could, I wouldn't. I had made Jeff pay a lot, and it really affected his job. But I didn't feel like I had truly confronted him. I hadn't hit him or seen him fall. He needed to understand that everything was his fault. Well, maybe I did confront him, but I wasn't there to witness it. My anger was going nowhere, and it was hard for me to handle. Miss Crenshaw helped me realize this, and it gave me a way to cope. We talked about it, and I had an idea. She suggested I keep a journal of my thoughts and feelings, trying to view things from an outside perspective. I created a character named Banco and made him the observer of everything that happened. While I wrote, I couldn't help but come up with some really funny bits and jokes. It felt easy, like it was just pouring out of me. When I finished, I looked at everything and wondered what to do next. I decided to send it to Maury, and he gave me a suggestion that changed everything. He told me I should perform the material myself. Although I had stepped away from performing after my encounter with Jeff, I had the talent for stand-up, and the material was worth sharing. Maury said, "No one knows this material like you, Ben. Why not give it a shot? Treat it like therapy." His silent add-on was clear. He wanted a cut of the profits. So I thought about it. I practiced some parts in front of a mirror and made my choice. I would return to stand-up, and I did. Of course, it wasn't that simple. I had some advantages since I knew people in the business and where to perform at smaller places, but it was still a tough journey. People were puzzled about why I was booking shows instead of Jeff, but I got good at dodging those questions. Overall, it felt like working out a muscle I hadn't used in a while. I started to remember emotions that I hadn't felt in years. It was both exciting and nerve-wracking, especially when a joke didn't work. I thought back on the effort it took to deliver a punchline or a story, finding the right timing and knowing where to pause for laughs. It wasn't as easy as riding a bike. It was more like reliving the struggle of learning something difficult. Plus, I could draw on what I had observed from Jeff. Although every comedian has their own style, some things are universal, and I learned a lot by watching him. But this time, there was no Jeff to distract me. I kept going and tried new things, and over several months, I created a performance. It was a 90-minute show about Banco, my imaginary friend, and what he went through. In doing this, I was able to face some of my own challenges and found a new way to perform comedy. I called it pathos comedy. I shared real stories that showed how difficult life can be, especially for good people. My stories were filled with jokes and humor, but they were based on true events. They captured emotions, unexpected reactions, and the full range of human feelings. Sometimes the stories had sad endings. I learned that if I brought the audience down with heavy themes, there would be gasps as they realized what people can do to one another and how betrayal can lead to deep feelings of hurt. The audience understood this completely. Then, when I followed it with humor, the jokes felt even stronger. After a tough moment, people were eager to laugh again. It was amazing to see how that worked. At first, my stories were mostly about my own experiences. Later on, I created new tales or reused ones I had heard. But for a long time, my act was based fully on my life. Of course, Jeff found out about my performances. Maury told me that when Jeff first learned I was doing stand-up, he just smirked and said, "Good luck to him. He'll need it." However, when he saw a recording of my performance, he became upset and angry. According to Maury, he couldn't fight back. If he did, he would just be attacking another comic, which is bad for business. More importantly, he would be showing that he was the one who caused the betrayal, and he didn't want that out in the open. As it turned out, reporters were already figuring things out since I was performing on my own now and not with him. Plus, my ex-wife had been seen with his partner. It was easy for people to make connections, even if no one was officially stating anything. When asked about me in interviews, he would often start by answering, "Is it you Ben is talking about?" with a quote from Oscar Wilde. "The only thing worse than being talked about, dear boy, is not being talked about." I have to admit, that was a clever response. When people pushed for more clarification, he would joke, "I can neither confirm nor deny that many people would like to know me," pointing to himself and making a playful gesture. This is a clever way to answer a question without actually giving a direct response, while also adding a hint of humor. The truth is, even though the public didn't know who was being talked about, everyone in the industry certainly did. There was no doubt about that. As a result, his invitations to appear on TV shows and game shows dropped sharply. Even Maury, looking over his glasses at me, was clearly unhappy. He relied on Jeff's presence to make money. I shrugged and smirked as if to say he couldn't stop me. Jeff's career took a serious blow, and he understood it was because of me. What he really valued was performing, and now he couldn't. It wasn't just that I wasn't there to help him find jobs. He wasn't even being asked anymore. That felt like a strong form of revenge against someone like Jeff. I managed to stay busy, appearing on shows like The Tonight Show, which really helped my career. I was not going to tour like Jeff did, but I was earning money and getting good opportunities. People liked my work. I went on a few quiz shows and did interviews, and things were looking good. In the end, I regained some self-respect and lost a lot of the negativity I had. I'll be honest, my feelings weren't as intense as wanting to confront him directly, but this was a more gradual and subtle form of revenge. I found a way to benefit from his troubles, took away his new ideas, and made jokes that allowed me to create a new career. My new success came at Jeff's expense, as well as Monica's and, in some ways, Jemima's. I was okay with that. The media picked up on some of the jokes and stories I shared, and although I always said, "This is Banco's story," they assumed it was about me, and they were right. I just never admitted it outright, and was careful to avoid legal troubles. I wasn't too worried, as it was all based on truth. After a couple of years doing this, I noticed some personal changes. It wasn't the original goal I thought writing would help, but it did clear away some of my negative feelings. I can't explain why, but the anger and hurt slowly faded. I stopped feeling bitter about the past relationships. Jeff was just someone I used to work with. Monica was a former partner. I didn't think about Jemima at all anymore. She eventually divorced Jeff, and I heard that his romance with Monica ended a few years later. Jemima was in a really bad car accident, which left her with trouble moving and using a cane. Some people said she had other issues too, including needing a special bag for her health. I never looked into it much, but you know how rumors are. She might have been Monica's closest friend, but it seems that didn't mean much when it came to taking care of her after the accident. I didn't think Monica would be so uncaring, but I also didn't expect her to treat me that way, so who knows? Maybe there's more to the story. I really don't care to find out. Jeff's career took a big downturn after I stopped working with him. He tried to create his own material, but it didn't go well. He went on a small tour to test new ideas, but it didn't lead to a bigger tour because the reviews were not good enough to attract funding. He released a best of DVD featuring some successful performances from before, and that did fairly well. I just watched the money come in from that. I heard he looked into ending our partnership, but he supposedly got the same answers I did, so he dropped it. I decided to check the company's income records just to annoy him. It cost me a lot, but we discovered a significant amount of money that our DVD distributors hadn't reported, so we both ended up benefiting from that. About 5 years later, Jeff found a new writing partner. The new guy wasn't amazing, and he didn't know Jeff like I did, but they created enough good material to go on tour again. Jeff never reached the same heights we did, but maybe that was just the way things were meant to be. A few years ago, they made a documentary about Jeff and wanted me to be in it to talk about our time together. I firmly said no. I didn't watch it. I believe life is too short to focus on him and our past. We were in the same places a few times, like award shows. Once, we were both booked for a quiz show without knowing the other one would be there. When I saw him, I asked, "What's he doing here?" The producer smiled and said, "Surprise!" I walked out right away. They tried to sue me, but I reminded them of a clause in my contract that said I couldn't have any contact with Jeff, so that matter disappeared quickly. I heard he got married again and had a few kids, but that didn't last either. As for Monica, I tried my best not to pay attention to her. Sometimes it was tough since she was a great interviewer and her work appeared everywhere on TV, in books, magazines, radio, and podcasts. She was hard to ignore. She had taken it easy and done very little for about 18 months after we broke up, but then Britney Spears made headlines again, and Rolling Stone needed someone to interview her. Monica got the job. The interview turned out well. I always thought Britney was impressive. She works hard, that's for sure. It's clear she has her own struggles, and I felt for her. From what I know, she had a few relationships after Jemima, but none lasted long, and I don't know anything about them. She never remarried. In her late 60s, she published an autobiography where she shared everything. She talked about what happened between us, her feelings, my feelings, and even the awards meeting. Reading it was tough. I think she wrote it partly to punish herself in a way. She probably felt she deserved it. When the book was released, many people wanted to interview me about it, but I said no to everyone. Jeff gave one interview and was treated harshly by the reporter, which made him decide never to talk about it again. We met again a few years ago. I was hosting an awards show and she was there with an important actor, not because they were dating, but to observe him for a writing project. I was replacing another comedian who got sick, so I stepped in last minute. It was purely a coincidence that we were both there. I completed the show, and when Simon Bartleby received a Lifetime Achievement Award, I spotted her at his table. I stayed professional, but I couldn't help glancing her way from time to time. After the event, I was at the rooftop bar, enjoying a cigar and a whiskey while looking out at the bright lights of LA when I sensed someone was near. I knew immediately who it was. "Smoking, Ben? That's unusual. It's not good for you," she said, her first words to me in over 10 years, sounding quite motherly. Fitting, I suppose. "I think you lost the right to lecture me, Monica," I replied, still focused on the view. I took a long puff and blew it out for emphasis. There was a moment of silence before she said, "That doesn't mean I don't care, Ben." I sighed and continued to gaze at the stars before finally turning around to lean against the railing. She still looked great. The dress hugged her well, highlighting her best features while subtly concealing others. It showed just enough to be elegant without being overly revealing, and it fell to her knees, enough to show off her lovely legs without being too bold. Heels and simple jewelry that had its own value. I knew that because I had bought her the pearl necklace with small diamonds around it that she wore. She looked good, and I was sure she knew it. She was not someone who kept her talents hidden. I really didn't know what to say. There were no easy topics to discuss. She was my ex-wife who had been in a serious relationship with another woman, then became involved with my business partner, and ended that with a difficult choice, only admitting it when confronted. There wasn't much for me to say that wouldn't lead to anger. "How have you been? You did well up there. You always found the right balance between humor and respect," she acknowledged, showing that she wanted to talk, even if it was about ordinary things. "It's easier than true stand-up. Just a few jokes and acknowledging some audience members before moving on," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "But it still needs original material." There was clearly a lot unsaid, and I wondered what she truly wanted. "I watched your early shows. I went several times," she said, moving closer and leaning on the railing beside me, drink in hand, looking back at me. 27 times if I count them all." I chuckled at how silly that was. "It was my way of staying connected to you," she said. "But when you started sharing those stories, I sank down in my seat, thinking everyone would notice they were about me. Jemima came with me the first time and left halfway through, trying not to cry. I know they were real stories, and you had every right to tell them, but wow, Ben, you went deep." I couldn't help but smile a little at that. Mission accomplished. Every time I watched you, I felt the regret of what I did all over again. I saw the hurt in you. You were up there making jokes, but I could see your sorrow. I know how you hide your pain, the ultimate sad clown. It felt like punishment for me, picking at the wound inside me, feeling regret again, seeing you share what I did to you, how it hurt with everyone while I couldn't even acknowledge my actions. It was a prison I built for myself, and I kept coming back for more. Well, you're the only one who understands that, so whatever. I waved it off, offering a bitter smile. She looked at me as if she disliked what she saw. "Is this who you are now? Is this what I turned you into? Being bitter doesn't suit you, Ben. It makes you look old," she said with a hint of bitterness in her voice. "If I look that way, it's because of you, the other woman, and my good friend Jeff," I shot back, refusing to feel worse than I already did. The familiar pain inside me turned into a heavy anger. "Don't try to make me the bad guy here, Monica," I replied. She looked at me with a sad expression. There was a pause, and then she whispered, "No, of course, Ben. I'm sorry. I miss you so much. I'm so lonely, and I keep thinking about how good our life was together. I wish we could find a way back." But there was no way back, and I chose to stay silent this time. To fill the quiet and out of curiosity, I asked, "What happened with Jemima?" Monica sighed and took a sip of her champagne, gripping the glass tightly, her knuckles white. "After we broke up, I moved in with Jemima and stayed in her loft. It was nice, but it felt empty. I missed you too much. I was so worried about you and how you were feeling, but there was nothing I could do. You made it clear you wanted to be apart, and now I see that I made all the wrong choices for you. Jemima spent a lot of time trying to help me. I was struggling. What was supposed to be a time for us to discover each other turned into her taking care of me. I was often lost in my thoughts, trying to cope with everything. I'm really sorry I caused that, I replied sarcastically. Her expression grew even sadder. Ben, I wasn't trying to blame you. I know I caused my own issues, not you. I just wanted to share how I felt. I just stared at her, understanding but unsure. Once I started to get a grip on my life as much as possible without you, we had a decent couple of years. Being with a woman as a partner is very different. You talk more, but it doesn't always lead to action. With men, you tend to act. You try to fix things. Women express feelings, while men focus on solutions. Anyway, she smiled shyly at what I said, and I found it charming, but I quickly pushed those thoughts away. After the accident, everything changed. Jemima became so bitter and, I'm trying to think of the right word. Hostile? I chuckled. You're the journalist. You should know. I'm an interviewer, Ben, not a journalist. I can tell you weren't listening when I mentioned that. I shrugged. Anyway, she was filled with anger toward everyone. She thought it was the world's fault. She was hurt badly and could never move past it. She was resentful and everyone had to just accept it. By then, she had divorced Jeff, so it was just the two of us. For someone who was once a model, she didn't have many friends. It was just me, and I handled everything. Since no one else could take her anger, I got it all. She was sharp, rude, and always on my case. She believed I would leave her every time I was gone for more than a couple of hours, accusing me of being with someone else. If someone came over, it wouldn't take long for her anger to show, and her snide comments would come out. It was as if her personality changed completely after the accident. I even asked the doctors about it, and they mentioned her head injury. But it was more than that. It felt like she had lost part of herself. Still, there was a limit to what I could handle. I loved her, but I loved who she used to be, not who she had become. So much for in sickness and in health, I scoffed. I wasn't married to her, Ben. We never made promises. Yeah, well, we did. And look what that brought us. I couldn't hold back my words. Even after all these years, I was still trying to get back at her. I guess I wasn't as over her as I thought. Miss Crenshaw would be so let down. Monica stayed quiet. She just looked out at the lights, the way I had been. She gazed for a moment before continuing. It's ironic. I left her, but not for the reasons she feared. There was no one else. I had already ruined my life with you, and I wasn't interested in another relationship. I mean, really, I am not a lesbian. I was a Gemimian. But I just couldn't take it anymore. It was such a harmful environment. Nothing I did was right, and she could really hurt you with her words. I cared for her, but she just tore me and our relationship apart. She turned to me, extending her hand. Can I? She asked, pointing at the cigar. I shrugged and handed it to her. She took a long drag and exhaled slowly. I really shouldn't do this, she said softly. She died a couple of years ago, she stated plainly, giving the cigar back to me. Her internal organs started to fail. We knew after the accident that she would never grow old. The damage was too severe, and sure enough, they began to fail. She was never going to get a kidney transplant. Not with the long waiting lists, especially since she had been so hurt. They weren't going to prioritize her. Not when there are people who really need help, and it would have only bought her a little more time anyway. She reached out to me. It seemed like she understood what had happened and said she was sorry for her behavior. It was clear she had no one else to turn to, so I decided to help her. I did some research and got in touch with people in Switzerland. I arranged for a special flight. I was there holding her hand when she took the pill, and the light in her eyes faded. Monica stopped speaking after that, her voice flat. She wasn't really talking to me anymore. She was just sharing her feelings with the world, looking at the twinkling lights of downtown Los Angeles. So, if you're still thinking about getting back at Jemima, you can just forget it. She went before you could. There was quiet after that. I thought about saying, I'm sorry, but the truth was I didn't feel that way, so I kept silent. It felt strange to realize that I could think like this, knowing someone close to me made such a choice. I knew I wasn't a bad person, but I had to admit there were times I wondered, and this was one of them. Then Monica turned to me and said, You know, some of her last words were about you. She was really upset about how we broke up. She never wanted that. She was happy sharing me with you. She knew you were important to me, and she never wanted to come between us. Some of her last words were about how she wished she could have said sorry to you before it was too late. She liked you a lot. She always called you Jeff's better half. She often thought about how nice it would have been if the three of us had spent time together. She was troubled by how our love could have harmed our marriage. It never seemed fair that something so good could come at such a price. A price to you. I took on that burden, but you didn't deserve that. She couldn't understand how her happiness and mine had to happen at your expense. She paused for a moment, staring at the lights. But it did, and I can't fix that. I did something terrible, thinking it was for love, and it hurt you and your relationship with your friend, with my new partner, and with me. I just wish there was a way to change everything. It was clear she was waiting for me to say something. Maybe she hoped for forgiveness, or maybe time had passed and she wanted to be friends again. Not a chance. This conversation only made me realize how disgusted I still was with what she had done and how she had made excuses for it. I still cared for her a little, but the love I once had was fading. But the main feeling I had was that she had done something really awful to me. I didn't feel hate anymore, and my anger was fading. I just looked at her and saw a very flawed person who had put herself first, even when it hurt me. She would never really understand what that cost, at least not like I did. I didn't want to be close to her again. I wasn't trying to hurt her any further. I had already done that. Still, I didn't want her around as a constant reminder of how my trust in her had led to pain that still lingered. When I glanced at her, I felt a deep sadness and a sense of loss. I was sad about what she did and the toll it took on everyone, including her. I felt bitter about what we might have had together. Maybe we could have started a family, who knows? Our relationship had been strong and fulfilling, just what I needed until it all fell apart. The idea of continuing while she had another relationship just didn't make sense to me. For me, what made our bond special was that it was just us, together against the world. Once that changed, everything lost its meaning. Miss Crenshaw and I had talked about this. She helped me understand why my feelings were so strong and why I was so firm about how I felt. I thought of our relationship as something built on trust, and when that wasn't there anymore, it felt over to me. The pain and betrayal didn't help either. In any case, I was finished with it. I looked at her hopeful face and struggled to find words. I was done trying to hurt her deeply, aside from some sharp comments, but I also didn't want to go down that path again. More than anything, I wished I could have what we once had. She seemed almost to be asking me for it, and it would have been easy to give in, but I was damaged inside. I had built up walls to protect myself from more hurt. No amount of therapy could break through the scars that had formed. I wasn't strong enough to deal with that yet. She must have seen my face because hers fell. "I can see that you're still hurt by what I did. Are you?" she asked softly. I just pressed my lips together and looked at her. "I hurt you deeply. I'm so sorry, Ben. You have no idea how sorry I am. If my pain from losing you is only a small part of what you feel, then I can't apologize enough. But please understand, it wasn't your fault. Nothing you did caused it. It was just a situation that happened at the wrong time, revealing a side of me I didn't even know was there. If I hadn't met Jemima, I might never have understood. I'm really sorry for hiding things from you, for how it affected my actions, and for all the hurt I caused us both. Please take care of yourself, Ben. I love you and always will." With that, she stood up, tears in her eyes, and quickly left. And that was the end of that evening. It took a few years, but I eventually found my balance again. I returned to being calm and in good spirits. Sometimes when you pretend to be cheerful, you end up feeling that way. It's true what they say. Fake it till you make it. One thing that stayed with me was the distrust. I dated women and tried hard to connect, but I could never fully let go of my doubts. It wasn't that I was jealous or wanted to know every detail of their lives. I just couldn't give all of myself. I held back part of me, just in case I got hurt again. This part was mine alone, and it remained untouched. This never improved, and they all noticed in the end. They realized I wasn't completely there, and I suppose it says a lot about the women I chose that not one of them was okay with that. They recognized it, pushed me to change, and then moved on when I couldn't fulfill what they needed. None of them were willing to settle, which was probably the right choice. I was picking the right partners, but not able to offer them what they wanted. The emotional scars Monica left would always be there. I healed, but those scars changed who I was forever. I never found another woman to love like Monica. I met many great women, but no one felt like the one. But that's all right. My life has been quite good, even better than many others. Later in life, in my 50s, I met someone who was in a similar situation. She ran her own cosmetics business and didn't want a serious, committed relationship any more than I did. She had also been in a tough situation before and, like me, didn't want to rush into anything rigid. Still, we both wanted someone to share life's joys with, someone to talk to when something happened, someone to connect with. At that time, I lived in Napa Valley, and her business was in San Francisco. She had a home in Marin County, so we were able to meet regularly when she wasn't traveling for work or when I wasn't busy. As time passed, I did less performing and focused more on writing for other comedians or making appearances on TV, which meant I was around more often. We were a couple of sorts. But each of us kept our own home, and sometimes we needed time apart. That was okay. It wasn't where I thought I would be in life, but paths aren't always straight, whether by choice or due to others' actions. I was okay. I might never feel completely whole, but that's just part of life, I suppose. It could be much worse, and while money doesn't bring happiness, it does help ease some of life's troubles. The truth is, I would never get past what she did. I understood that I was hurt for good, and I didn't deserve any of it. I tried to make the most of what I had left, but the hurt would always stay with me. That hurts. But life is what you make of it, and I did my best. Sometimes people put on a happy face because if they didn't, they would just feel sad. Hey everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.